Hello everybody, my name is Dirty Dutch Mantell, and I want you to stay tuned because I'm getting ready to do an exclusive interview with Hannibal TV, talking about my career, talking about all the famous wrestlers that you've seen over the years, and what I'm about to give is like a 40-year recap of what's happened to me in the wrestling business over the past 4 decades. Don't go away.
We are here with the legendary booker and wrestler Dirty Dutch Mantell, who has also had several names in WWE. Uncle Zebekiah was one of them. I wasn't really watching during your last run there, so I forget the...
It was Zeb Coulter.
Zeb Coulter, okay.
And I dropped my nephews, so I had no family underneath me in WWE.
And we're not too far from Nashville where he lives, so he was kind enough to come out and do this interview. And to start it off, could you tell us a bit about your childhood?
About my childhood?
Yes.
Well, I've written 2 books. One's called Tales from a Dirt Road, and the other's called World According to Dutch. And if you're an old school wrestling fan, it's actually, I'd highly recommend it, because the fans today don't know or don't understand how the territorial system used to work in professional wrestling. And in those books, I don't really talk any about my childhood, but I am going to write, I'm coming out with another book that will describe my childhood in depth and where I came from. You hear from some wrestlers. Let's take Ric Flair, for example. He was adopted. His father was a doctor, made good money, but I was the farthest thing on that spectrum I could get. I grew up in the Carolinas, dirt poor family. My mother died when I was 12. My father was an alcoholic, and it wasn't a very pleasant upbringing.
Were you a wrestling fan when you were growing up?
Not really. I'm still not really a wrestling fan. I do it and I appreciate it, and my brother was a wrestling fan more than I was, and I watched it when I was a kid. But even watching it when I was just growing up, like 8, 9, 10 years old, you know, you always hear the stigma. Oh, it's fake. It's this. It's that. But that didn't bother me. I did appreciate the art form behind it, because I knew they would go out there, and I enjoyed the interviews, I enjoyed the matches, I enjoyed it for what it was, and I kind of had it in my mind that, but my brother, and I don't want to change the subject here, but my brother was really the one who wanted to be the wrestler. But he was married, and he had 4 kids, so that dream had already passed him by. And then I grew up and went into the Army, got drafted in the U.S. Army in I don't want to date myself, but I'm older than water, in 1970, and went in the 25th Infantry Battalion, Vietnam. And when I got out, I had a friend that had started wrestling in Atlanta, and that was back when they had territories. They had Atlanta and they had Florida. Well, Atlanta would be Georgia, and then it would have Florida, then they would have Mid-Atlantic, which took the Carolinas and Virginia, then 2 in Tennessee, and then Alabama, and then Texas had 2 or 3, and you know, all the different areas that they would have wrestling. But he was wrestling in Atlanta, and just happened to mention to me, he said, hey, won't you come and talk to the people over here in Atlanta and see if you can hook on? So I just drove over there one day, and guess how many matches I'd had?
0.
No, I'd had about 10 maybe, 10, okay. Not a lot. And the guy says, well, what's it take for you to live? Oh, how much money? And you got to keep in mind, I was coming off an Army salary, which was $156 or $165 a month.
Yeah.
Now, granted, everything was much, much cheaper in those days.
Yeah.
But he said, could you make it on 300? And 300 was double what I was making. And I said, well, yeah. And I ended up making 400. Basically, back in those days, $400 a week in the wrestling profession in 1970. It's 72 probably.
It's still a lot in today's wrestling profession.
Yeah, it could be. But I thought I was in heaven. But and I remember my first match, I drove, and it was like August in the South. And I drove from South Carolina to a town called Valdosta, Georgia, which is some backwater town down in South Georgia. not very far from the Florida line, hotter than hell. And I remember driving down there in an unair-conditioned car, and you know why it was unair-conditioned?
Because they hadn't invented it.
They hadn't invented it, but they didn't even have air conditioning in it.
Yeah.
It was like 105 that day.
Okay.
And I drove all the way to Valdosta, had a match, and I guess they must have liked it, and because they hired me the next week, and I went to work.
And just on Vietnam, did you see any action when you were in Vietnam?
Well, I saw the ground a lot, crawling around. It was, and a lot of guys that's been there, they don't really talk about it, so I don't want to really go into it, but
Yeah.
because I used to hear the word triggered. Sometimes I got to watch what I say even to myself, because they used to be called flashbacks, and I don't think I'll have one today, but I saw enough to know that I wanted to leave. So I was there 11 months. So
Was that probably some of the worst time of your life being over there?
well, no, not actually. I mean, I've had actually worse times than that, but see, you're not out fighting every day.
Right.
I mean, you don't get in these firefights every day.
Yeah.
You might get, I think the whole time I was over there, 4, maybe 5. A lot of mortars coming in on top of you at night,
Yeah.
you know, and just for the grace of God, I escaped it. But a lot of guys, 58,000 didn't.
Is it true David Schultz was telling me when I interviewed him that he had heard that they would skin some American soldiers alive and hang them by trees?
That was the myth.
Okay.
That was the myth. But, and remember this, the press didn't tell you everything.
Right.
They're not telling you everything now, because a lot of those things they keep away from you, and they don't want the people to know. If the people really knew what really went on in government and in wars, it would change a lot of people's outlook.
So who was running the Atlanta territory when you were in there that first time?
Well, it was a guy called Ray Gunkel and Buddy Fuller. They were like two of the stalwarts, I guess, of Southern wrestling. And I think they opened it, and I forgot, and they had bought it from some guy, but it was even ancient history when I was there.
Right.
And then what happened there is they had, Ray Gunkel died of a heart attack right after a match in Savannah, Georgia against Ox Baker. And then, because he was the owner, so his wife took his ownership, and when she came in, the other owners didn't want her there.
Right.
So they wanted to, here was their chance to force her out, and they were just going to pay her whatever they thought she would take. But she didn't want to leave because she saw what was happening.
Right.
So she bowed up and started her own company. And then in Atlanta, Georgia, it was one of the first instances of, they called it opposition back in those days. It's really competition. And they had two companies running Atlanta with TV for over 2 years. And both TVs were Channel 17, the Ted Turner station. And we would do they would do their TV in the morning, and we would do ours about 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay.
So we'd actually sometimes run into each other. They would be leaving, and we'd be coming in to the same station, same ring, just different announcers and maybe a ring curtain around the ring.
Is it
and
true?
business was good for both of us for a long time.
Is it true that Ann Gunkel may have had some type of sexual relationship with Ted Turner? I heard that rumor.
Yeah, it's possible, I'm sure. Because Ann Gunkel was a nice looking lady.
Yeah.
And Ted liked ladies. And you know, who knows?
And I guess Bill Watts was one of the bookers running opposition to her at one time.
Well, I think Bill Watts was there. Then I forgot who else came in, but Jim Barnett actually bought the other company.
Oh, okay.
Jim Barnett bought the old company, but I think it was called ABC Booking or something. I mean, I'm going back in history now.
Yeah.
Hell, I don't even hardly remember those days. But when he took over, he had just come from Australia.
Right.
And he took it over. Then he started bringing the big names in, and then Atlanta. And eventually, when you have enough big names, and Ann Gunkel wasn't turning over her talent that much, and she couldn't offer as much money, so it was only a matter of time then before the big guns won out, and they did.
And where did you head after Atlanta?
To jail. No, not really. I think after Atlanta, I went to, I'm trying to think. I hit a couple places. I hit Nashville for a short amount of time. Then I went to Texas. But I ended back up in, then I ended in Florida.
Right.
I didn't end up there, but I had a pretty good little stay in Florida, about a year. And that's actually where I really learned to kind of work, because they had good talent and good booking, and Eddie Graham was a genius. And
why was he known as such a genius for people?
He was just a natural for the time. I'm saying for the time. Nowadays, you'd say, well, I don't know if that'll still work today. But still, wrestling is the same as it's always been. You still have to have an antagonist. You still have to have a protagonist. Because I think if you put two guys out there and they both guys are just the same level, they're not mad at one, and they're say it's 50-50, no matter, and this is what I've never heard said before, but no matter who wins, half your crowd's pissed off.
That's true.
Half the crowd. So it's a lot easier just to get people just to hate a guy or not like him. And then when he kind of gets his comeuppance, they're all happy. Now he can come back and do something dastardly and get everybody back against him again. But somehow along the line, that got lost. Because nothing's worse than seeing two guys. It's like watching two football teams play each other and you don't give a shit about either one.
Yeah.
You know, if I saw two football teams, I don't know. I'll pick one team.
Two CFL teams.
Well, I'll pick a team. I don't like their uniforms. I don't like those guys. So they're the bad guys. And but when you have two guys and nobody cares who wins, it's a boring match.
I've been told that if Eddie Graham, he probably couldn't do this because he was a promoter, but I've been told by a few wrestlers that he could have been one of the greatest heels of all time because he was such a natural heel.
Oh, he was a natural heel. Because he was like, see, who brought all the natural blondes out was Gorgeous George, who was the front runner, even before Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, the bleached blonde hair.
Right.
And Eddie was just a convert of that style. But Eddie was more of a wrestler, or Gorgeous George. Gorgeous George was a good wrestler, but most of his stuff was showboating and showbiz, a lot with Buddy Rogers. But Eddie Graham was actually, he was a tough son of a gun.
Did you witness any of his stretching sessions with...
No, but I heard about him. Because Buddy was notorious for, say, a fan would come up to him, oh, you wrestlers are a bunch of shit, and I'll beat your guys or whatever. He said, okay. And he would give them a date at the Sportatorium, which I still remember the address, I don't know why. 108 Albany Street, Tampa, Florida. I think that's it. But I've been hit on the head a couple 100,000 times, so that could escape me. But, and he would tell them to come down and be at the Sportatorium at, I don't know, 11 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday or whatever. And the guy would show up. And then Eddie would be there, and Bob Roop would be there, and the Briscoes would be there, and Hiro Matsuda would be there. And whoever amateur wrestler that was in the territory at the time, they would all be there. But Eddie had a secret. Eddie would say, well, before we start doing any of this, we got to warm you up. And the guy never knew. Well, they'd have him do 50, 100 squats, and they'd have him do this. By the time he actually got in there against the fresh guy, he was already tired, and he literally beat the shit out of that guy. One guy actually ran his pants was off for some reason. They pulled his pants off or something, and I heard, now this is a rumor, that he actually ran out on the street with no pants on, just trying to get away from them. But he would change their minds, because back in those days, maintaining credibility was very important to the health of any wrestling promotion. Because if it got out like it is now, that it's all pre-rehearsed and it's all set up and predetermined, back in those days, those hardcore fans, they wouldn't go. They would just, they wouldn't go, because back in those days, and even up to say 15 years ago, you could still find people who thought wrestling was on the up and up.
Well, and even today, some of the goofy stuff that goes on turns off.
Oh yeah, it does.
Like the dick grabbing stuff and the magical bombs. I don't know if you've seen any of this goofy thing.
Oh, the magic bomb, the guy drops the hammer in the ring, everybody falls down, and all that kind of stuff.
So were you actually booking in Florida during that run that you had there with Eddie?
I did go down there as the booker in I think it was 84.
And what was that experience like?
Well, I went down there under strange circumstances because he was looking for a booker, and I think Eddie and Jerry Jarrett were kind of good friends, or were friendly enough. And Eddie told him, do you have anybody there that would be interested or possibly capable of coming down and helping book the territory? And Jerry suggested that I might be a good candidate for it. So I remember flying down there one day, and Dory Funk was the booker at the time, but he was leaving.
Yeah.
And Dory picked me up at the airport and took me over to the office, and I sat down and talked to Eddie. It's a job interview.
Right.
I sat and talked to Eddie for like an hour and a half, and he was just checking me out to see if my philosophy of the wrestling business kind of agreed with his, and I guess it did. And then I went down there. But at the time, Dusty Rhodes had just left Florida to go to Mid-Atlantic, to go to Charlotte with the Crockett's. And what he did, he gutted the territory.
Okay.
He took Kendall Windham, Barry Windham with him. He took Ivan Koloff, who was, he took him. And he took a bunch that were big star, and of course Dusty left. He was the big star, but all of a sudden, all the big stars that they had been watching on Florida TV. If I'm a fan, and all of a sudden there's no Dusty, and all of a sudden there's no Barry Windham, and all of a sudden there's no Nikita Koloff, and all of a sudden there's not this guy or that guy. He gutted the territory. So when I went down there, I didn't want to push the reset button, but it was already pushed. It was almost a do-over.
Right.
I had to start from basically scratch and trying to get over people who weren't over before, or just new people. And then Michael Hayes joined me a little later and brought the Freebirds in, which helped. But actually, business, I think I went down there in September 1984.
Right.
Excuse me. I left 6 months later because it was I was working like 80 hours a week, and booking's more thinking than it is anything else. Plus, I was wrestling too, so I was just, after 6 months I was burnt, so I left. But I do remember that I went down there and we went to Sarasota, Florida. And I booked myself against Ric Flair, because when Flair would come in, and you would get, in the territorial days, they would tell you when you could get the champion.
Right.
They would tell you. The St. Louis office, it was handled out of Sam Mushnick's office, and they would send you a letter and say, okay, you can have him first week of May, and you can have him at the end of July, then you can get him in like late October, and then Christmas or in December. You'd get him 4 times a year for a week. So he was coming in. So, and I would book him against Pistol Pez Watley in Lakeland, or in Jacksonville, or or in West Palm Beach, I book him against Brian Blair or somebody. But on Saturday night, I booked myself against him in Sarasota. And I remember that I pushed this show hard on, on the Miami stations and the Jacksonville station, the Tallahassee station, Tampa, Orlando, Naples. I pushed Sarasota like it was a WrestleMania. And it did have a good card, and we sold it out. And this is getting me to another point here, because that was Saturday night. We had a sellout, or almost quite a sellout. I was really happy with it. And we went to Orlando on Sunday, and right when we were getting in, I think Orlando was, I don't know if it's an afternoon show, because it might have been the Super Bowl that night, I don't know. I think it was. We had an afternoon show. And right before we got ready to leave, we got word that Eddie Graham had shot and killed himself. That's quite a shock. So, but I remember, I'm just talking off the cuff here. Eddie Graham, I remember I said the address 108 Albany Street, South Albany Street. I used to ride by there at night, and I would see Eddie. Sometimes it'd be 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and I would ride by there, and he'd be sitting, had a big plate glass window here, and he would be sitting at the reception desk. Well, I rode by there one night, and Eddie was sitting in there, and he looked troubled. And so I actually pulled in the parking lot, and these weren't paid parking lots either, by the way. It was like a sand parking lot with some grass growing there. So I watched him, and he couldn't see out because the light was in his face. And I wanted to ask him, Eddie, is anything bothering you? And this was like a month before he shot himself.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know this about Eddie, but Eddie shot himself, but the first shot didn't kill him. So he shot himself again. But the second shot didn't kill him. So what happened, they had to take him to the hospital and put him on, he was put on life support. And I think the family had to pull the plug on him the next day because the brain had stopped working. He was breathing, but he wasn't really alive. So that was my Eddie Graham story. So what was you asking me now?
What was the main thing that you learned from Eddie?
Oh, Eddie was, I learned a lot. It was just basic stuff. He says, and he didn't use these words, but he says sometimes things grow on their own. He said, pay attention to your fans, pay attention to your fan base, and organically something will create itself, and you need to be able to see it and capitalize on it. So I remember I had Barry Horowitz there. I called him Jack Hart. And Jack Hart was the loser Jack Hart. And I learned that idea by watching the Tampa Bay Bucks play NFL football because they lost every game. And that actually got the team over in reverse. So that's what I did with Barry Horowitz. He was Jack Hart there. And one day I went to him, I said, Jack, listen, man, I'm going to have to put you over today. And he went, what? No, don't put me over. I can't win. It'll kill my gimmick. But he actually got over with that. And this is to show you how sadistic some fans are. They were bringing signs like, Jack Hart, you're a bum, get a job, get off my screen. But he was getting over in reverse. And I never really forgot that little the loser gimmick because I've done it several times in different places. It always works.
And there's so many theories out there on why Eddie decided to kill himself.
A lot of theories.
I think it was Kevin Sullivan that told me that it runs in the family, I guess, because of Mike, and I guess someone else in the family had also killed himself. But
well, yeah, his grandson killed himself.
Oh, even the grandson has killed himself.
And his son, Mike, killed himself.
Yeah.
With a gun, I think.
So do you think there was I've heard there's a real estate deal that may have gone bad, he may have had to do some prison time?
That was the rumor that was set, that some real estate had some shady background to it. and he thought that would be brought out and he would be embarrassed. Because Eddie worked his whole life to, Eddie came from a very, very poor background. And it was a little town above Chattanooga. I think it was called Dayton, Tennessee, was where he came from, I think, or around there. But he came from a very, very sparse and tough upbringing. And when he got to Florida, he wanted to be well respected, and Eddie Graham was well respected in the state of Florida because he was a big booster and supporter of the Boys and Girls Club, and people respected Eddie. And I did hear that it could have been a real estate deal that went south, and I heard a few more things. I can't remember what it was, but business actually wasn't that good at that time because Dusty, like I said, Dusty had left, taking the territory. So. And I don't know who else was. I think Hiro Matsuda owned a part of it. I think Buddy Fuller still owned a part of it. It was what I call the Southern Mafia of the wrestling business. You know, they were connected in Florida and Atlanta and different places, in Alabama too, and Tennessee.
And I guess Eddie also had a bit of an alcohol problem. Kevin was telling us that he would fly drunk sometimes and do some crazy stuff when he was
well, when I was there, I don't think he had so much of a gambling problem, but when I saw him, he always looked really tense and troubled. Because a lot of times I wanted to sit down and just talk to him. I just wanted to pick his brain. But he had other ideas, and he had to go somewhere, and even when he would come to the office, he'd be on the phone all the time to somebody. You know, I never asked him, but.
And a lot of American fans and Canadian fans don't know that you were actually quite a legend in Puerto Rico. Could you talk about your first trip coming down there and some of your success over there?
Well, I was working in Nashville, and Tom Ernesto, who was assassin #1 of the legendary Assassin Tag Team, who I thought was, and Tom Ernesto and Jody Hamilton, they were the Bolos before the Assassins. So when they became the Assassin, I thought they were the greatest team of all time. They had a great look to them. They were great talkers, very serious, very intimidating, drew a lot of money. But Tom Ernesto was booking in Nashville, and he had helped Carlos Colon out when Carlos Colon first went to Puerto Rico. He helped out. So they apparently were talking quite a lot, and Tom suggested me to go and work in Puerto Rico, and Carlos said, well, I don't think we even had tape in those days that you could send. They may have sent something, but I think he just took Tom's reference and booked me down there. So I had never been out of the country before. You know, maybe one time. Maybe I went to Japan one time. But so when I went down there, I didn't know shit about Puerto Rico. Nothing. I remember flying out of Atlanta. They had an ice storm, and I was supposed to fly out at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't fly out to 12 that night. Flew all night. Landed there about 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30. Immediately when I stepped off the plane, I had just left 15 or 20 degree weather because it was really, really cold in Atlanta. And it was like 90 on the ground in Puerto Rico. And they didn't have an air-conditioned terminal in those days. It was just open air. You know, they open the windows and the doors. So immediately the heat hit me. So automatically me and Puerto Rico didn't agree with each other. Because it was, I mean, if you're leaving 20 degree temperatures and you hit 90, that's quite a shock to you. So I went, and it was on, I remember I went on January the 6th, which is Three Kings Day. You know what that is?
Yeah, it's a big celebration there.
Yeah. But it was a Wednesday, and that's when they had their big show, and I'm thinking, what the hell? Why would they have a big show on a Wednesday? See, it's the second Christmas in Puerto Rico. See, in Puerto Rico, when Christmas season comes, they start celebrating on December the 1st. And they go the whole month of December, and it ends up on January the 6th. That's the second Christmas. So that was the big show. So I remember going there, and Roberto Clemente Coliseum, walked in there, place sold out. Because Puerto Rican fans were very passionate about wrestling. See, they have 3 sports in Puerto Rico. They have baseball, cockfighting, and wrestling. And then politics, that's another sport they get the bloodthirsty on. So it was a sold out crowd, and I got my first taste of the Puerto Rican fan that night, just listening to him. And very loud, very loud. So we started a gimmick, me and Frankie Lane and me. We were called the Vaqueros Locos, which is the Crazy Cowboys, I guess. And I was called in the office the first week there just to come and talk to Carlos about how you want this to go. What do you think we should focus on? Well, see, I'd never been contacted about that before. Nobody ever talked to me about, let's do this angle. They just told me what to do. So I went in there, and I had just read about this angle that the guy would put up money that anybody could beat him. So Carlos, I sat down, and Carlos sitting there, and he said, well, what you want to do? And I'm like, I really didn't know what to say, but I acted like I did. I said, hey, I got this idea, and maybe you'll like it. Why don't we'll put up $1,000. $1,000 in those days was a lot of money. Put up $1,000 to any team that can beat us. And he said, I tell you what, I love it. He said, I loved it already. Why don't we put up 1,000 silver dollars? Because they don't have silver dollars in Puerto Rico. He said, we put that up. Now it's different. So we started out for any team that we couldn't beat. The team didn't have to beat us. We'd have to beat the team. In 10 minutes or less on TV, we'd give them $1,000. And that thing took off. So it got hot and hot and hot. And I remember the first angle we did, we got beat for it, of course. And then we put the guy in the hospital. They carted him out. We turned a heel babyface against us. And for 9 weeks in a row, we went outside to the big baseball stadium on Saturday night, and we sold out 9 weeks in a row with probably 14,000 plus every Saturday.
Wow.
And it's a record that still is, they hadn't
I think it's a safe record. Yeah,
I don't think you could give 14,000 tickets away down there now.
And of course, you were there that night. It's well documented. You've written about it, where Brody was passed away.
The day didn't start off right. He had a just one of those days things didn't feel right. When I walked in the dressing room, it still didn't feel right. I saw Invader and Carlos and Jovica sitting in this little cubbyhole like deal where it's a baseball stadium. So what that little cubbyhole was for the manager, really. And they were sitting in there, and they were talking. And I went and sat down in the corner, and Brody sat right beside me. I sat right in the very back corner so I could watch the whole dressing room. Because I never turned my back on anybody in Puerto Rico, because it was just the way I felt. And the vibe became so intense, I'm thinking, what the fuck? So I had to get out of the dressing room. I left for no more than 5 minutes, 7 minutes. And then I went to the dugout. I was watching the crowd come in. And then I said, well, I'm going to go back. And when I got back, it already happened. I was walking up some steps, and I heard it get louder and louder, and some commotion. I said, what the hell's going on? And then I walked in and saw Brody laying on the floor. And then, of course, I said, what happened? And they said, you know. First they said, Jose stabbed Brody. I said, who? Jose stabbed Brody. Jose who? They said, because everybody's named Jose in Puerto Rico.
Right.
They said Invader. Invader stabbed Brody. I mean, that was a lot. Because a dressing room is your sanctuary if you're a wrestler. That's your safe spot. And to think something like that, yeah, fights is one thing. But somebody stabbing another guy, unheard of.
So Invader had already left the scene, basically?
No, he hadn't left. When I came back, Invader was still in the shower. And Jovica was in the shower. And they were screaming. Of course, when you get in those showers, the ceramic showers, you know, sound echoes and bounces.
Yeah, for people that don't know, that shower, there's like a flipping door that flips open to it, and it's like a brick shower room.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
Yeah.
Ceramic. I call it ceramic.
Yeah.
And the door is not a clear door. It's a translucent door that light will come through, but you really can't see anybody's there till you get up close. But they were in the shower and I heard them screaming, even if they were speaking Spanish. But even if they had been speaking English, it would be hard to understand what they were saying because it was echoing.
Right.
And Brody was on the floor, and everybody they didn't know what to do, and he's trying to call an ambulance, and the ambulance didn't get there, or the medical personnel didn't get there till 45 minutes later. So he laid on the floor of that dressing room for at least 45 minutes before they even got there.
Was Tony Atlas, we've interviewed him a couple of times, and he said he was also really upset in the dressing room this time. And
he was.
A lot of people were sitting around, going over their matches, acting like there wasn't someone actually dying on the floor.
Well, we didn't know he was dying.
Okay.
We didn't know he was dying. We didn't know how bad he was hurt. See, nobody knew. Tony got up, and, you know, Brody was a big guy. 300, right at 300, or maybe 310, 320. But when you put him on a gurney, and you got to go up some steps,
yeah,
it takes some strength to get him up the steps. Tony, the little Puerto Rican paramedics, excuse me, they couldn't get him up, and so Tony just picked him up and took him out.
Okay.
He took the back, and he got in the ambulance with him and went down to the hospital with him. So when he came back about an hour later, probably, and I don't know how he got back.
The story he told us is he was throwing a temper tantrum in the hospital and they wanted him out of there, so they said that Brody was probably going to be okay. And I forget exactly the mode of transport to get him back, but...
Well, I don't know how he got back,
yeah. And
I've heard the same story. He's told me the same story. But when he got back, he was upset. But for him saying that guys were sitting around, going around their matches, they had come to work, is all I can say. We knew he was hurt. We didn't know how badly he was hurt. And actually the Invader came back too. And started conducting business like whatever happened, happened.
So he was still booking the matches?
Yeah, he was still booking the matches. He left, and he was gone for about an hour.
Yeah.
And then he came back. But I think he was back by the time, and then Tony got there, and then Tony saw him. That's when he went off. And he said, "Don't you guys know what's fucking going on? A man he's gonna fucking die here." And Invader was conducting business, and he heard Tony, but Invader's brother, he tell you about his brother?
No.
Invader's brother's in the dressing room too. And I think somebody heard him say to somebody else about Tony, he says, "I guess Tony Atlas wants the same thing."
I think he said Sika told him the next day that it's probably be a wise idea for him to get off the island.
Who told him that?
I think it was Sika.
Could have. But the next day we had a big meeting, and we all didn't go to the town the next day. Nobody went. I don't know. I don't think it was a coordinated boycott, but nobody went. All the Puerto Rican guys went, but none of the Americans went. So they couldn't have a show. And that was a sold-out stadium too, or sold-out building. So we didn't go. And we had a meeting. I forgot whose room it was in, and the hotel we were staying in. And somebody brought up, I thought it could have been me. I said, "Wait a minute, a man," and we already knew that he had died. And I said, "Wait a minute, a murder happened here, guys. They got to be investigating this." So we made a few calls around to somebody, and it got to the police station, and yeah, they were investigating it, and they wanted to talk to us. So the rest of that night, the detectives came over, and they took Tony first, and he went and gave his deposition. He was gone for they took him at 5 o'clock. He didn't get back till 10. I went, damn, did they kill him or what? Then they came and got me. Then they slowly took everybody through the night to give their deposition. And they took it from there, and he was arrested Tuesday, never spent a day in jail. His bail was made. He just went down there and presented himself to to the magistrate, I guess, in Puerto Rico. He'd never spent a day in jail. I don't even think he was even in handcuffs. And
was it even a news story there?
oh, a big story.
Oh, okay. So
Huge story.
The public knew about it.
Huge story. It was front page news. But I knew that he had been found not guilty before I got the subpoena. I had just heard it that morning that the jury had declared him not guilty.
They had deliberated for an hour or something.
An hour, and they had lunch. And somebody said, well, how could that happen? Well, I'll tell you how it could happen. Brody, they used Brody's character as a wild man against him. Because everybody on that jury had watched wrestling. And this is what we're talking about, hardcore fans believe it. Well, you know, Puerto Rico's pretty hardcore. And you didn't hear that wrestling's fake in Puerto Rico so much. Because they thought it was it was blood and guts, and it was. But when they sit on that jury, the defense attorneys argued that Brody was a drug head, and he was out of his mind, and he was a psycho, and he was dangerous, and he was menacing. And so when they saw that, defense attorney describe him like that, they believed it. Now, Jose Gonzalez, the invader, was basically a national hero. So, okay, and you got 12 Puerto Ricans on a jury, and it was an American guy that they thought was could be dangerous. And it was never in doubt that Jose Gonzalez killed Brody. That was never in doubt. What they were arguing really was it self-defense. And so the jury determined, yeah, it was self-defense because regardless of how you feel about it, that's how they judged it.
But no one seems to argue that Brody did not have a knife when he walked into
Brody
that
did not have a knife. He had no reason to have a knife.
He thought he was going to get booking instructions.
Well, I also heard that they owed him a lot of money. But and it was just a weird night because in Puerto Rico, every time I ever went down there, it always was a feeling of dread, like a danger. I don't know why. I guess because when I had that hot run in '79, every Puerto Rican on the island tried to kill me. See, that's how I learned the bad words in Spanish, like hijo de puta, or cabrón. See, when I go out on the street, I couldn't walk 3 steps. People say sucio, hijo de puta, which is a son of a bitch. And that's how I learned the bad words first. I thought it's because of my great wrestling ability, till I found out, no, they actually did hate me. Because I was the first heel that went down there and really trash-talked the island. You know, I said their coffee sucked and I wouldn't drink Puerto Rican coffee. And
that is true.
Huh?
That is true.
Yeah. And then I would say that I would call them like, they all need to learn English or we need to cut off welfare to the whole island. And I basically called the women unpaid prostitutes, not in those words, but that's what I meant. And the men, I would call them effeminate, which is self-explanatory. So it pissed them off. It literally, and I can't tell you the times that I fought my way from the ring in Puerto Rico during that run. We went to Roberto Clemente one time with a barbed wire match. We fought on the way going to the ring. Because in Puerto Rico, when I first got there, they used to put the main event on 4th.
Yeah.
I thought that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard in my life. I went, why would you put your main event on 4th? That's stupid. Till I went out there 4th, and they were still trying to kill me. And Carlos told me, he said, if you wait to the end, you'll never get to the ring because they'll be so drunk, they'll be attacking you before you get there. It was proven to me that night in Roberto Clemente because we went on last with a barbed wire match, and we fought to the ring, and I got in the ring, and I'm looking at the crowd, and I'm saying, you know, in about 15 or 20 minutes, we're going to have to be going right back through them same son of a bitches that we just fought. And I doubt if they're going anywhere, and they didn't. We fought back. And you know, shows in Puerto Rico have a habit of going long. They are like
start late and
never ending. You know, they start late. You know why they do that, right? Concessions.
Time. Oh,
concessions. So he can sell a lot of concessions. You know what time I got out of that building with Berlo Clemente that night? We actually got in the car and left.
No.
2:30 in the morning. And now people were still waiting on us. The cops actually was going to wait them out. Well, it comes time where the cop shift was up, they'd leave. So it was just us and the fans. And we got in there, and I used to carry a club with me, and they would stand back, but you got to watch people throwing stuff at you.
And I've heard some people say, just to digress for a moment, like Nikita Koloff told us when he was there was a military with M16s protecting him, but I know Carlos a little bit, and I can't see him hiring military personnel to protect him.
Well, they did at one time, but it wasn't military personnel. It was, they were more like a SWAT team.
Okay.
I have seen SWAT teams there. Because those are the guys that, you know, they dress like military, and they would cuff they'd wear the boots, and they would blouse their pant legs, and they didn't take any bullshit. The guy get out of control, they just whack him. Yeah, but it was very rough there. You have to watch more than anything. People are throwing stuff at you. That's when I started wearing a big hat and a big poncho. So when I'd go to the ring, you know, it'd be coming from one side, especially in the stadiums. I would turn this hat down, the poncho here, and I put the belt right there, and go. Crazy.
Shield.
While I'm talking about Vice Network, which is in Canada, based in Canada, you familiar with them?
Yeah, actually, the person is going to talk to me closer to the date that video is going to be.
Well, we're doing a deal for the fans. It's called Dark Tales of the Ring, which is some of the stories that fans have heard about, and it's done reenactment style, such as, say, Snapped. You know what Snapped is, right? It's all about women killing their husbands, or husbands killing the women, or the wives, or whatever. But they're doing it reenactment style, and one of the stories they're going to cover is the Bruiser Brody murder in Puerto Rico. They're going to cover the Gino Hernandez story. They're going to cover the Von Erich story. They're going to go and the Owen Hart story. These are the untold stories that you've heard of and you've read a lot about, but yet it's never been put into like a TV form. They're going to do that. It will air in 2019. And the reason I bring that up is because I do the narration for the series. And it's going to be, I think, very, very interesting.
To talk about Vice a little more, you mentioned they're doing a story on Gino Hernandez's death. I've actually interviewed a lot of people about Gino Hernandez's death as well. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people find it interesting that the cocaine was found in his stomach when he actually passed away. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on the whole situation?
Well, I don't even know the Gino Hernandez story. I know as much as the regular fan on the street.
Oh, okay.
But I will find out because Evan Husney, who is the producer and director of Dark Tales from the Ring, he told me it's a fascinating story. And he's giving me a little bit of, you know, heads up on it. And he says, I won't give it all to you. I want you to experience it as we lay it out.
Okay.
And they did a great job. They did a great job. And I've seen 3, and I was in 1. The first one was on Bruiser Brody. And the other 2 were just fascinating. So this is going to be fascinating too.
And for Eddie Gilbert's death in Puerto Rico, were you around for that?
I wasn't around, but I remember I was the one who brought him in.
Right.
I brought him in, and this was '94. And I brought Eddie in, and I loved Eddie like a, you know, I knew him since he was a kid. And his father and his brother, I knew them all. And I met his mother, knew his family. And I brought him in because he called up and he's looking for he wanted to come in. I said, okay. We brought him in. But all of a sudden in like October of that year, one day he's up and gone. And Glenn.
Yeah.
He was down there. I brought him in too. And he was staying with Eddie, and he knocked on my door one morning and had his bag with him. I said, where are you going? He said, Eddie left. I said, what? He said, Eddie left. I said, you gotta be kidding me. And he didn't call me anything. He just left. which is nothing new in the wrestling business. But I thought since I've known Eddie for so long, he would have given me at least a heads up, but he didn't. So I don't know why he left. I never really found out. I guess in Puerto Rico, how long were you there?
Off and on for 4 years.
Well, how long did you stay at one time? 6 months, 8
The
months?
longest was a year.
Well, you have island fever too. You know what I'm talking about? You want to get out.
Yeah, well, luckily for me, I had a really close girlfriend there, so I didn't mind it too much.
Okay.
And I'm from Canada. You got to remember this. It's cold.
Yeah, I got it. But so Eddie, he left, and then I called WWF, and I've been calling them. I've been trying to get in there for a year or two. So I finally called up one day, and they said yes. Because I always remembered, if you want to get booked, at doing anything, just keep asking. Just be persistent. Keep asking and asking and asking. Because the answer is always going to be no till you at least ask the question. Right. But then the worst thing they can say then is no, but they never said no. They said maybe another time. That's the way they handled it. So I just happened to call up there at the right time, and they said, yeah, we can use that. We got a spot for you. So then I gave my notice in Puerto Rico. So when I told Carlos I was leaving, and he went, Carlos said, he's had a bad habit to scratch his head like this. He said, well, do you know who could help us? I said, well, I don't know. He said, well, what about Eddie Gilbert? And I said, yeah, because Eddie had still had problems after he left.
Right.
He had already went to Jim Cornette's Smoky Mountain and it didn't work out there, and so I said, yeah, I think Eddie'd do a good job. He said, well, will you call him? I said, no, I won't call him. He said, why not? I said, well, Carlos, see, Puerto Rico, if you have any type of a substance
it's
problem,
easy to get there.
Oh.
And you have time.
And pain pills and somas were easy to get. Get them over the counter. As much as you want.
I think that's how Bison ended up dying.
Probably. And Eddie, I knew he took somas. But he wanted me to call him. I said, I'm not going to call him, Carlos, because I saw Eddie, and I love him to death. I saw Eddie a couple of times, and he was just all messed up. And sometimes he was messed up almost to the point of where I said, you know, this is not good. This is not good. So I was used to call him. Carlos called him, and I remember he came in. I left, and I think Eddie come in like the week after I left, started booking. And that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to be in creative.
Yeah.
Because he had a good mind. He really did. And then I went to work in WWF, and I forgot what, I think it was March, or no, in February, I got a call, and he told me about Eddie. Eddie was found dead in his room in Puerto Rico. So I would like to say that it shocked me and stunned me, especially because he was a friend, but it didn't really surprise me.
And any thoughts on Missy Hyatt? Speaking of Eddie Gilbert, we did an interview with her a few months ago.
I was only around Eddie and Missy a little bit when I was in Birmingham, and never really spent a lot of time around her, nor did I really care to, because it was just different personalities clashing.
We'll go back to the Memphis stuff a little bit later, but to jump ahead to when you really popped the Puerto Rico territory, I guess in the late 90s, early 2000s, could you discuss how that all came about?
I got a great story. I was working for Carlos. Business was good. I go in there, and I was working 3 days a week. I was making, I forgot what it was, $1,200, $1,400 a week, whatever, which was okay. But I went in there and asked for a raise. And Carlos says, and I've told this story a lot of times. He said, well, we can't really afford to pay you more money. And he scratched his head, which to me was an admission of, well, we could pay you more money, but we're not going to. Okay. The IWA, Victor Quinones and Savio Vega and Miguel Perez, they started this other company called IWA, and they had already reached out to me. Well, I helped them because I had a rating. I did a record rating there one time in 19 I guess, of 99,
Right.
of an 18-3. Because the TV was just hot. Hot.
And there, I guess, was a total of 8 hours of local wrestling on TV.
At one time, no, I think the IWA, did they have 2 hours?
When I was there, they had 2 hours Saturday and Sunday, but it may have been different when you were there.
No, they had 2 hours. And Carlos did too.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying, right? 8 hours a week, yeah, with 2 companies. And so I went down, I left out, but before, when he turned me down, he wanted me to find an opponent for Carlitos on the big Christmas show. And he says, who do you think we could get? I said, well, what about Jeff Jarrett? I love it, yeah. Call him. Can you call him for me? I said, yeah, I'll call him. I go in there, and I've known Jeff since he was like 10, 12. So I go in there, and I call Jeff, and I said, Jeff, listen, we're thinking about, would you be available at such and such a date? I think it was January the 6th date, the date we talked about their big Christmas show. And he said, yeah, I'll be, it was in the middle of the week, so he would probably be off. And I think he was in WCW at the time. He had just left WWF. I know he wasn't in the WWF, I know that.
Right.
I said, what will you charge Carlos to come in? And he went, well, he said, I said, for one match, he said, hotel fee, which is a given, airplane, which is a given, and $5,000. I went, what? $5,000? He said, well, yeah. I said, hey, Joe, we just want to rent you for one night. We don't want to buy you. He said, well, that's what they pay me in Japan. I said, well, I hate to tell you, but this is not Japan. I said, well, listen, let me ask you this. We want you for 2 nights, on a Sunday night too, or the night after. What will you go? He said, I'll do that for $2,500. Keep in mind that he had just turned me down for another like $300 a week.
Yeah.
He had said, no, we can't pay you that, but would consider paying Jeff Jarrett, and I love him to death too, $7,500, and then he's going to be gone. I said, okay, I'll go in there and see what he says. So I went in there, and Carlos is on the phone, and I go in there, and Carlos always had a big bottle of rum on his desk all the time, and my big cigars. So I picked one of those cigars up, peeled the wrapper off, and lit that thing up, and got a glass for myself. He's still on the phone, pour myself a big shot. I'm sitting there smoking a cigar with a big shot of rum in my hand, and Carlos is talking, and finally Carlos hung the phone up, and he said, what did he say? I said, well, I think Carlos is going to hit the ceiling. I said, well, he said $5,000 first night, second night he make you deal, $2,500, $7,500 for 2 nights. I started drinking, and he went, well, that's good. I almost spit my rum out. I said, really? He said, oh, yeah. He said, but I need somebody from, do you think you could get him down a little lower? I said, oh, I'll see what I can do. By that time, I was fuming. He'd turned, I'm doing 16, 17 ratings on TV, but yet he wouldn't even consider a raise from me, and all of a sudden he's going to give Jeff, I don't begrudge him if he can get it, fine.
Yeah.
So I went in there and I told Jeff, I said, Jeff, listen, I just talked to Carlos, he wants to book you, but he wants to see if you have a little bit of a lower price. I think Jeff was surprised it was even accepted.
Yeah.
He said, well, what do you suggest? I said, I wouldn't come off of it a fucking dime. He said, really? I said, yeah, that's what I won't tell him. I'll call you back. See you later. Hung the phone up, walked in there. Then I told Carlos, he said, what did he say? I said, no, that's his price. $7,500 for 2 days. He said, okay, book him. I said, well, I will. Well, I left there and went back to my hotel, made a call, called Savio Vega, and I said, hey, we need to talk. He said, okay, meet me at the office. And Victor, you know where Victor Quinones lived? Well,
No,
you've been.
I've been to the office, but I've never been to old Victor's house.
Well, he was in a condo, a nice condo, right on East of Verde.
Right.
And I went to his place, and there was Savio, and there was Miguel, and Victor. And I said, guys, this is what I'll come in for. And I said, let me go home every month for a couple of days and give me a place to stay, transportation to and from the matches, right? And And then I put my price that I wanted from Carlos. I threw that in there. If you can do that, we got business. They said, okay, when can you start? I said, right after I start January 6th. That was that date again, January 6th. That's a good starting date. So then me and Carlos got into a big argument, and he said he fired me, and I said I quit. So it's somewhere in the middle. And I showed back up on January the 6th for the big show, but not for Carlos, for the IWA. And it took me about 3 months to get IWA moving, but once I got it moving, took off.
When you went back to the office to say you were quitting, did you take another glass of his rum and another
Well, no,
cigar?
actually, he came and brought me my money.
Okay.
And it was at my hotel.
Yeah.
No, I've always liked Carlos. Carlos, it's just business. It's just what it is. Carlos, I made him a lot of money in '79. I made him a lot of money later on, so I don't have any problem with him.
But that's what always happens. If you say you're going to quit, and once you're serious, he'll bring you the money, and then the same procedure happens with the wrestlers anyways.
Well, he knew I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And I think he kind of heard some rumblings underneath that, I was talking to them. So I think he didn't fire me, but he wanted me gone, and I wanted to go. So it was a mutual understanding that I wouldn't work for them anymore.
So what were the keys to your success for IWA? Because between the two companies, I always found IWA was much more organized.
Well, that's exactly. I organized it better.
Were you the one that got it to be such a machine? Like interviews for WWC, for instance, you'd be there 2 hours before they'd record an interview with you. IWA, that you'd be there and you'd do it and you'd leave.
Oh, you leave, yeah. So I organized it because I didn't feel like it was just. I actually had a good time producing it and directing it and booking it. An old-time booker told me one time. He says, "When you start booking, always book something that you enjoy personally." So, and I enjoyed. I had a guy named Exotico there who was like an effeminate character, and he was great, and he was funny, and so that was my like comic relief. But he was over.
Yeah. He
was over like a son of a gun. And I just took, when I first had a meeting with them, with Carlos, with Savio and Miguel of the IWA, they said, well, this is what we're doing. We're doing this and this and this and this and this. And I said, okay, we're getting rid of that. They said, no, you didn't hear us. This is what we're doing. We're doing this and this. I said, no, maybe you didn't hear me. Then we're getting rid of it. They said, why? I said, is it drawing now? They said, no. I said, exactly. So we might as well go back to the drawing board, erase it all, and restart. And that's what we did.
Are you the one that created the Abyss character?
I did create Abyss. Great story about that too. I met him on an independent show somewhere in southern Indiana. And he's a great guy. He really is. Very likable, very outgoing, a little bit insecure, but. And then I went to work for TNA on their first show because I had brought Jeff down and he saw these big sellouts I had.
Yeah.
He asked me, he said, how are you doing this? You know what I told him? I don't know. I'm just playing with it. I can't make the people come. They're showing up because they were having a good time. I think when people go to a wrestling show, they go to enjoy themselves.
Yeah.
They don't go to be screwed around with a bunch of damn bullshit finishes and DQs and all this. They come to have a good time and laugh. And I'll get back to the Abyss thing in a minute. But what I did in Puerto Rico, when the show ended, nobody left.
Right.
I educated the fans. Nobody got up to leave because they knew, stay tuned, we're going to get the trailer for next week. And when the bell rung, they would sit there because they knew the show wasn't over.
Yeah.
Because then, all of a sudden, here come the heels, and then here come the babyface, and here come the heels, and here come the babyfaces. But I would leave. I would beat most of my heels most nights, but they would leave with more heat than they had leaving. So that was my secret. And I did that for 3 years, and the people never really. I educated them to that fact. TV show was good. It was well produced. It was actually one of the better shows I thought during that time period anywhere. So the Abyss, he called me. I met him on the TNA show, and I said, "Hey, would you like to come work in Puerto Rico?" He said, "No, they're gonna use me really good here, And I said, well, if it doesn't work out, call me. Guess when he called me? Next week. He says, hey, I'm interested in coming in. I said, and I'm just playing with him. I said, wow, man, I wish I'd known that last week. It may have been 2 weeks later. I said, I wish I'd known that last week. Well, why? I said, I just steal that spot. Oh, no. Oh, come on, man. I said, well, let me see what I can do. And I'm just playing with him. So then I called him back a day or two later, and I said, yeah, well, I moved a few things around. I didn't move nothing around, just playing. And I said, I can use you. Oh, great, man, oh, great. I said, and I said, I would like you to come in under a gimmick. He said, what kind of gimmick? And I forgot how I came up with the name Abyss. I was talking to one of my assistants. I only had 2 assistants. I had one they called Moody, was a great guy, big wrestling fan, but and really, really good when it came to talking about episodic wrestling stories. Very good.
I think he took over after you.
He did take over. And then I had my video guy who actually knew wrestling quite well. So when I called Abyss back, I said, I'd like to bring you in, but like under a gimmick, not as Prince Justice. Yeah. He went, well, what's wrong with Prince Justice? I said, there's nothing wrong with it, but I don't think it would translate to a Puerto Rican crowd, and I think you'd be more intimidating if we put you like under a hood. He said, what do you mean? I told him, and I said, I'd like to call you Abyss. Silence. He didn't know what to think. I said, hey, you still there? Yeah. He said, but if I come in under another name, what about my fans? I said, what, all 7 of them? But he came in and he was over instant the first night. Because I didn't advertise him or anything, and he just showed up in the main event, and the Screwed like, top little blonde-headed, I had a blonde-headed little Canadian, Shane?
Shane, yeah, I know.
We screwed him in the main event, and the Abyss was over. And he stayed over for like 9 months, till he left.
Did you have any role in getting the character of Ricky Banderas over?
Oh, yeah. Well, he kind of had the gimmick. He kind of had that. And I just kind of made him more mysterious. And I would shoot a lot of things with him at night, with night vision, and he was always be in cemeteries, and he would be hanging around with like a church in the background. It was that edge that you couldn't really describe it, but you knew that he was a little bit, he was on the fringes, and he helped me a lot with that. But we did a lot of stuff, like weird stuff with him, like, because he would spit blood out, and he had the eyes that made his eyes, the contacts that made his eyes look crazy. Great, tremendous worker. I couldn't, his work got him there. I just give him a little bit of the character. And I didn't let him speak much either. It was more or less, if you saw him, it was more or less your mind working just off what you saw on TV. Instead of him talking, people got a vision of the character, and it helped him a lot.
Was it you that brought him into TNA for that little run?
I did bring him in TNA.
Yeah. And he's had a lot of success in AAA in the past 10 years, I guess.
Yeah, tremendous, I've heard.
Now, what about Apollo? He seemed to have a lot of talent. It was probably you, I would assume, that brought him to TNA. But
Apollo, I did.
But nothing really. Was that just personal issues?
Well, Apollo doesn't speak very good English, and he's not a very good, politician. I was the only one who knew him, and we put him with Conan and Homicide. I put him with Homicide and Conan, and Conan didn't really see that. He didn't think he would fit the gimmick, and he probably didn't. So that kind of, we had to move Apollo out, and then there was a few more issues with him that we just, it wasn't me. I think he was more or less voted out by the creative team.
I always liked him personally as there's a lot of I found IWA had a lot more politics backstage within the wrestlers the WWC, and he was one of the friendly Puerto Ricans to the American guys.
Apollo.
Yeah, that's.
I know he's a good guy.
And what about a guy that was roommates with Flash Venom?
What about him?
Yeah.
I brought him in too. Flash Flanagan.
I think he holds the record for an American lasting in Puerto Rico, in IWA anyways.
Well, I brought him in. And you know when he took the bump off the first floor balcony?
Yes, and for
It
anyone
almost killed him. I wasn't there. But
that was crazy.
I don't know how he got up from that. He was going to try to bust it, be thrown through a table, but he missed the whole table.
Yeah, if anyone hasn't seen that, I believe it is on YouTube. I will try and paste it over this because I don't think
He goes up, he fights up. I'll tell the people what he did. They fight up, him and Banderas.
Yeah.
They fight up up the steps onto the first landing in this arena. And where was that arena?
That was the Bayamon. What's it called?
Yes, it was.
Pepin Center.
What was the name of it?
Pepin Centero or something.
Pepin Center, yeah. So what they're going to try to do, where he tries to throw Ricky off the balcony, and Ricky somehow throws him off. And they had set a table up before, but when Flash Flanagan slash Venom comes off, he misses the whole table and just hits the floor. And I wasn't there, and it surprised me he got up. He's lucky too, very, very lucky. So if any of you wrestlers out there are going to try to do these crazy moves, if you're going to do one, go to WWE, then do it. At least you'll be paid for it.
Yeah, because that had to have been at least 20 feet in the air, possibly.
At least.
And on
But it could have been 20 from them if he stood up.
Yeah.
Take him off. I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
I won't take a bump off the first turnbuckle. I get nosebleed then.
Why do you think he never made it bigger? Because he really had a good passion for the business. Do you think it's just he didn't work on his body enough to make it?
I don't think that was it either. I think it was just, Flash is a different animal too. To succeed in this business, you have to do a little politicking.
Right.
Behind the scenes. Because a lot of fortunes have been made because of, if you politic for yourself, you can get in. Now, I don't care how good a worker you are.
Diamond Dallas Page is a good example of that.
A perfect example. He's such a good talker, and he'll talk you into using him.
I guess the downfall of Puerto Rico is just the booking ended up going into the slums, I guess, eventually, and then Victor died. There's no
When Victor died, that's the funds. And he was the heart of it anyway. He had the money, and so when he passed away, I think it just fell to hell. Went to shit.
And I guess you were recruited to TNA out of Puerto Rico when they saw the crowds you were drawing.
Yep.
Was that Jeff? Because I know you were using Jeff.
It was Jeff.
In IWA, yeah. Did they make you a good offer without going into the details of it?
It was a good offer. It was. But see, I was home.
Right.
See, I had been gone for like basically 2 or 3 years. I would come home every month. So basically I was gone.
Okay.
So TNA was based in Nashville. I lived right outside Nashville, so I could come home. And by that time, either you work for WWE or you didn't work for anybody to make any money. So for me to be able to come home and be at home with my daughter, my family, it actually meant a lot to me.
And you were booking TNA through, I think, unquestionably the peak of the company when it was the most popular.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the techniques and strategies you used to make the company so popular at that time?
Well, I think you got to give the credit to those knockouts, the girls, because that was my idea to start a girls division, and I was met with. I didn't get met with that with 100% approval. I brought it up one day, and I've told this story quite a lot. They just looked at me like I spit on the Pope, like, what are you talking about, a girls division? Because up to that time, WWF was treating their women just like sideshow. Bra and panties match, this, that, and the other. It was like a almost half striptease type attitude about it. But I wanted to take these girls and make them serious wrestlers, serious performers. And they didn't see that working out.
Right.
I said, guys, listen, if we can have professional girls basketball and professional girls golf, professional girls bowling or whatever, I'm sure we can have a professional women's wrestling league or wrestling division. And they said, well, can we find enough girls? And this was my smart ass answer. I said, well, I think there's 310 million people in the United States right now. And I think half of them, if I'm wrong, like 155,000 of them or 155 million of them are female. And probably of the age bracket we're looking at, 20 million. I think we could find 10 or 12 females out of 20 million to kind of come and do this. And they still didn't want to do it. But I kind of shamed them into it. And Gail Kim, we had her, and she's a great performer. And she was used to voice her concerns, like, I want to wrestle, I don't want to valet anybody. She was valeting Jeff, she's valeting somebody else. She said, I want to wrestle. And I told her my idea, and she was ecstatic about it. She says, oh, if you could get that, it'd be wonderful. I said, well, I'm going to have help because I don't know any of these girls. Oh, she says, I know all the girls, don't worry about it. She says, but one you need to look at is Awesome Kong. She gave me a video of her. I put the video on, I went back home, and I went, what the fuck? She was tremendous. I saw a match between her and, I can't remember the girl's name. Not Jamada or something. These girls beat the living crap out of each other. I mean, if I didn't, it looked like a shoot. That's what it looked like. It looked very, very believable. But it was using that Japan hardcore style.
Yeah.
And it was believable. So I remember I brought Kong in, and Gail was there. And I remember the first night I had Kong on the Impact show. We were in Orlando at Universal. And you know, most people come to Universal during that period were tourists.
Right.
They didn't really know the story. Oh, you had a few hardcores that would come every time we'd go down there. But most of them were just tourists just to come to see a show. Say some fans show up from Canada, they don't know the story. But they like wrestling, and they'll come and they'll stay for 30 minutes and then they'll leave. So I sent this little bitty blonde-headed, you know, nice looking little blonde-headed girl into the ring with like cheerleader type. Then all of a sudden you heard dong, dong. Then they saw Kong come out. The place stood up because they said, this is different, and let's see what happens here. And Kong got over like a son of a gun. We would put Kurt Angle out there with Sting, and we might do a 2-4. We put Kong and Gail Kim out there. They'd do a 2-8, 2-9. One time we did a 3-4. And the knockout ratings was what was keeping TNA in the game in those days. And we had some other great stuff going out too, but my sister, who's not a wrestling fan at all, but she watched the show just because I was associated with it. She told me, she said, you know what I like on your show? I said, what? She says, well, on my show, but on this show. I said, who? She said, Awesome Kong. Well, we called her, I think we called her Amazing Kong, did we?
Yeah.
That's the only thing she would watch on the show, is Kong. And she would tell her grandsons, tell me when Kong comes on, and I come in and watch. And they say, Grandmama, Kong's on, and she'd come in, she'd sit down, she'd watch the match. The match wouldn't be 2 or 3 minutes. And when that was over, she'd be gone. It's the only thing she would watch on the show, which was a good barometer for me because I actually brought her in, and I knew she'd get over, and I got her over with the old Buddy style, the old Abdullah the Butcher style. I told her, don't go off your feet till I tell you to, and she never did.
What was her, why do you think she didn't really get over in WWE, just not given the opportunity?
Who, Kong?
Properly, yeah.
Kong, well, she got pregnant.
Oh, okay.
She got pregnant first, and they was going with her.
Yeah.
What was her name, Karma? She would have got
stopped watching
over.
by that point.
She would have got over like a son of a bitch. But she got pregnant and she had to leave. Because Kong, she's a great athlete. And she actually went to Japan, trained in the dojos with them there, and stayed there and lived there. And she just had what it took. And I'm a big fan of Glow.
Yeah,
I was a big fan of Glow when the original Glow was on. So then I hadn't watched the second season yet, but I watched the first season of Glow and I was impressed. I was impressed by the show, and I was impressed by Kong's performance. Because I talked to these girls, I said, girls, the first meeting I had we got them all there.
Yeah.
You know, the dirty white girl, what was her name? Bitch.
Oh, ODB.
Dirty white bitch, what it was? ODB,
ODB, yeah.
Oh, dirty bitch, whatever.
Yeah.
Got her. I got a few more. But the first meeting I had with these girls, I said, girls, we're going to present you in a different light. You're no longer whores. You're no longer sluts, bitches, cunts. You're professional athletes. And when you go out there, I want it to be serious, and I want you to kick these guys' ass. So when they heard that, they knew they all wanted to be taken seriously, not just, like stripper style. And when I gave them that opportunity, they bid on it, and they took it, and they ran with it.
Gail Kim is one of the few wrestlers, possibly maybe the only wrestler, that actually got over more in TNA than she did in WWE.
Well, they didn't give her. She was covered up in WWE.
Yeah.
She was covered up there. And she did get over more in TNA, and Kong did too.
Yeah.
Because we had time to give them. See, in TNA, we had Kong and Gail Kim main event the show 10 years before the WWE did that. And they did a rating. They did a 3-2 or a 3-3, which doesn't sound great because the WWE was doing it at times 6s and 7s, I guess.
Yeah. But now,
but at the time, a 3-3,
yeah.
they would jump over off a ledge to do a 3-3 rock.
WWE would. Yeah.
Oh yes, they would. A 3-hour show is a commitment to me. I know they're making money on it, TV wise. But if I go to a movie and I sit down and the movie says 180 minutes, I'm going, wow, that's a long time. I don't know if I can sit down and watch a 3-hour movie. It'd have to be a hell of a damn movie to get me to do it. But for every Monday night they want me to commit 3 hours, I can't do it.
Now, I heard some horror stories about Dixie Carter from Jerry Jarrett yesterday. I'm just wondering what your experiences were dealing with her.
She came from a family of money, and then when I kind of researched her dad, he was like, he was just a working guy until he was about 50, and then he got in some kind of business, oil business or building business around oil or something, and it kind of took off. So when she actually showed up in TNA, I didn't know her from Adam's house cat. I knew she was like the owner, or her family was the owner of the company, but she didn't understand the wrestling business. She wanted to be WWE, but didn't know how to get there. And she had her own ideas, and Dixie was almost like the type that you could almost tell who the last person she talked to by the way she would talk to you or to me. So if she talked to one guy and he had an idea, well, that was her idea too. Or she would take it and make it her own. But if she talked to somebody else, well, she'd adopt that strategy or that philosophy. But she didn't really have the background. She had the money, she had the funds. She didn't have the background to run the business.
And what about working with Vince Russo?
Well, I'll say one thing about Vince. I think Hitler had better write-ups than that guy does. But I'll say one thing about Vince. He had a lot of crazy ideas, but Vince's ideas were, he would keep adding to the idea. So you're going to go here, and you want to end here, and with some wild gimmick match or whatever. But here, he would throw all the gimmicks in. So this part here would be a rerun of what you've done there, and to blow it off, that's where we were, the philosophy of wrestling, it wasn't mine. I was more of a type to lay it out piece by piece and let it grow on its own, and then to peak it off at the end. But he would throw everything up front. Now I will say one thing, he thought all the time, and he was a hard worker. And I got along with him.
Was he saying bro as much in those days as he is?
No, I don't think he says bro as much in those days, or as much in those days as he says now.
Because we actually put a counter up during
How many
the
you do?
It was something like 180 bros in 2 hours.
Bro.
Really?
And everything is bro. Yeah.
I had enough of it after the 2 hours that I had to edit it. So I had more.
So you did an interview with him?
Yes.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Bro.
And we put a counter up for every time he said bro. And it was like 180 times in a 2 hour span. So it's just straight. I suspected it was just a gimmick, but.
No, it's not a gimmick. That's the way he talked.
So what led to you leaving TNA? Was that when Bischoff and Hogan came in?
Well, I'm trying to think. Jeff had a run-in with them, and they let him go, and he was like one of the owners.
Right.
Let him go. Then I was let go, and everybody in Jeff's camp was let go. Like BG, Road Dogg, they let him go, and me go. Then they let Cornette go. So I guess this was when Vince was going to take it over, Vince Russo. But he should have kept. I could see Cornette leaving because he hates Cornette. Cornette hates him. But I could, and they let Jeff go. But he should have kept me because I was like on his, kind of one of his allies. Not an ally, but I was an ally more than Cornette was. Because, he wasn't an ally of Hogan or Bischoff, either one.
Right.
So, but it was just, I was there 6 years, 7 years, and it had run its route. And to tell the truth, I was kind of ready to go. I wasn't kind of ready to take the pay cut, but I was ready to go.
And that thing with Jeff had something to do with Kurt Angle's wife, I guess.
No,
that was a rumor.
That's they were already divorced anyway.
Oh, okay.
Karen and Kurt were already divorced. She's a single woman. Jeff was a single man. I think his wife passed away in 2007. I think.
Yeah.
Maybe.
No, you're right on that.
So they were both single and they were both adults. But I think Kurt didn't like the idea of. It's a long. I don't know what went on, but I know it was an ugly time to be around him.
Speaking of Jeff Jarrett, let's get into the Memphis section of this interview. How were you initially brought in to work that territory? Just because you lived around here and you knew? No,
I'd worked in 1978. I'd worked for Nick Goulas, and I started there with Randy Savage. And on the TV, and Jerry Jarrett would watch our show a lot on Saturdays.
Right.
And he liked what he saw. So when I went to Puerto Rico and I came back, I called him and he wanted to book me. And he knew that what I could do because he had watched me enough, and he was a fan of it. And I came in and just got started.
Could you give us the short form of your successful feud with Savage?
With Nick Goulas?
Yeah.
Well, I went in there and I was a heel initially, and then I got to looking around and Randy was a heel. And I got to look around, the baby faces were kind of slim. So one night I called him, the business was terrible. Awful. And I said, Randy, listen, we're beating our heads against the wall here. I said, we don't have anybody to work with. I said, you don't have anybody over there to work with. I don't either. I said, why don't we work against each other? And he liked the idea. And the same guy who sent me to Puerto Rico, Tom Ernesto, I dropped the idea to him. He liked it, turned me babyface, and Savage got over it like a son of a gun because he had a good wall with me to bounce stuff off of. And Nashville had never seen anybody like Savage because he was like a crazy crackhead before crackheads were even thought a possibility. So if you're a wrestling fan and you're just anybody, you're surfing your channels, and all of a sudden you run across this wild man, and oh yeah, and you say, what the fuck is this? It's an instant intrigue.
Right.
So you start watching him, then you start watching me, and I remember taking Nashville from doing like, it might be doing 150 people, no more than 200 on a Wednesday night, to doing like almost 1,000. And it went there in about a period of like, say, 5 weeks.
Oh, wow.
So we just worked the same going and took off.
Bill Dundee told us a story about when he was attacked in the parking lot by Savage. He also mentioned there was a restaurant incident with Savage and someone where the police had to be called.
Oh, that's Waffle House.
Yeah, could you tell that? Bill Dundee didn't know that one, but he only...
Bill didn't know that one?
He said he didn't know enough details to tell what happened.
Oh, well, Rip Rogers and Randy were buddies, and that's when they were both single. They were living in an apartment in Nashville, and on Wednesday night, that was wrestling night in Nashville, I just wrestled him, and I guess he was hungry, so he went down to the Waffle House in town, and it's still there. It's on Harding Place Avenue, Harding Place. And he went in there and he said the place was deserted. So he sat down to order, and the waitress came over and she was taking his order, and a guy bust through the door. He said, "Hey everybody, I just got married." And they all knew him because he worked the first shift at Waffle House. Those were his friends. And the waitress left, taking Randy's order, and went over there to hug him. She had to go all the way around to hug him. Oh yeah. So that interrupted Randy's ordering. He was hungry. So she came back, and everybody was, they said, "Where are you going on your honeymoon, and what you gonna do, and where's the service?" And Savage had nothing to do with it. But all of a sudden he says, "Who gives a fuck?" So the guy says, and everybody heard him. All his friends there heard Randy Savage say, "Who gives a fuck?" It was an open, direct challenge to the guy. And the guy says, "Well, you better give a fuck." And the man said, "Well, I don't, man." Well, that was all it took. So the guy come over to Randy's table. Randy stood up, and all of a sudden it just broke out. They started fighting. And Randy's telling me a story. He says they started fighting, and the guy reached down and pulled out a knife. He was going to cut him. Well, Randy said he hopped the counter, out from the booth, and he grabbed the knife too, and he come back and he's swinging at the guy. And then he heard sirens going, "Wow, wow, wow." Somebody said, "They called the cops, they called the cops." So the little cowboy ran off. And Savage told me later, he said he looked down, guess what he had in his hand? Butter knife. It wasn't even a real knife. He couldn't have cut him. He might have scratched him a little bit.
Yeah.
So the police come in, and Randy was over in Nashville. Because when you saw him on TV, he kind of was burned into your memory. And the cops knew Randy. And one of the cops who come in had just worked the matches that night. And he told him to calm down, calm down, calm down. He wouldn't calm down. He was agitated. Then he tried to, now he's disturbing the peace. So now they're going to put him under arrest or detain him to talk to him. But he started fighting them. And they fought and fought and couldn't get the cuffs on him. One guy went to mace him, missed Randy Duck. He maced the guy behind him. Now, so here's the other cop going, "Ah, ah!" It was Keystone cops. But this time in the Waffle House, they have floor-to-ceiling, windows. Yeah. So you can see everything from the parking lot. And then they called the other cops. Here comes some backup. So the cop walks in, and he knows, and he had worked the matches that night. He was like a supervisor. This was about 12 o'clock at night. And he said, "Randy, relax and surrender," or whatever. And he said, "Bucket, man, not me. You're getting the wrong guy. He's getting away. He ran." And they told him to calm down, and he still wouldn't calm down, so the guy just ordered the dog. So while Randy, they kept telling him to give yourself up, surrender. No, he won't do it. Brought the dog in, and he told him to do it, and Savage reached out and kicked the dog. Then they turned the dog loose. The dog ate him a new asshole.
So I guess Jared Jarrett had to get him out of that one.
No, Nick Goulas got him out of it.
Oh yeah, because it was
Nick Goulas got him out of it because Nick Goulas, all he did is make a donation to the police league, and they dropped the charges and all, and they didn't want to go through the prosecution and all that. It would have been great publicity for Randy, but not such great publicity for the police department. So he just gave a donation to the church, to the police league or whatever, and they dropped the charges.
That's a good lesson for everyone, to remain calm when the police come.
Oh yeah, especially for the dog. And even years later, Randy never forgot anything. And I guarantee you he remembered that dog. Now, of course, the dog died probably a few years after that, or 10 years after that, or whatever. But I guarantee you, Randy had it in his head that if he could, he would kill that police dog. If he could, he'd get even somehow, because he never forgot any slight or anybody kind of fucking him around. And
what do you think he would have thought just on this subject? Because we know that Lanny told me this himself before whatever money he got from WWE, that Randy was insistent before he died that he wouldn't go into the Hall of Fame unless Angelo and Lanny were also in. And then whatever deal was made, Lanny caved and Randy was put in by himself. Do you think Randy would have been happy about that? Because we all know he loved his father a lot.
So Randy went into Hall of Fame by himself?
Yes, and I guess his pre-death wish had been
that they all go in as a
family, because the Von Erichs had gone in as a family.
Well, I can see that, because Randy and Lanny and Angelo were very, very close. In business, outside business, as a family, they were very close. And it wouldn't have bothered me if they'd went in there with the family. I don't know what was the big deal about that anyway. Why didn't he put the whole family in?
Probably because Randy wanted it, and you know how it is.
Well, Randy was held out, I heard, a long time because of a personal issue.
Yeah.
So.
No, but that's my theory, is the personal issue is probably why they just wouldn't have put the whole family in. But Lanny inducted him, correct? I think Lanny introduced Hogan, and Hogan was the one that inducted him, which is another thing Randy might not have been happy about.
Yeah. But, he was driven. When I worked with Randy, I'd have to slap myself in the dressing room to get ready for him.
Right.
Because I'd have to get myself psyched up to go wrestle him. Because if you left your aggression in the dressing room, he just beat the shit out of you.
Right.
So, great worker too.
The other feud you're really known for around this territory was your feud with Lawler, of course, if you could talk about that one.
Well, Lawler he had gotten hurt, and he had the title, and I forgot, and he was supposed to come back and win the title back from whoever. I forgot. But they didn't know how long Lawler was going to be out, so they put the title on me. And Jerry Jarrett, who I have a lot of respect for, and he did have some great ideas. A lot of people have a lot of great ideas, but it's the execution of these ideas that's what makes them good. And he says, well, what if I had Lawler challenge Dutch for the title? And he booked that. All he did is book the match. And I says, I remember the day we went out on TV to book it. I said, well, you want me to slap him? Or you want me to him to slap me? Or what do you want? He said, nothing. Just go out. I want to book the match, and I want you to talk about whooping Lawler's ass. And Lawler went out, and of course, you don't tell Lawler what to say. He's going to say whatever he wants to say anyway. Which is why I like Memphis, because they let you say really what you wanted to say. And so we had great business. It went about 3 months, but I only had about 3 matches with him. It was the longest, shortest angle I've ever been in my life. But every time they booked it, big house. Now remember I was telling you about Nashville? I was over in Nashville.
Yeah.
And that's how I got to Memphis, through Jerry Jarrett, living in Nashville, seeing Nashville TV. They were 2 totally separate territories. But in Memphis, it was almost 50-50 with me and Lawler. And in Louisville, it was like similar, because I had a lot of support, even though I was supposed to be the bad guy. And a lot of these people still hadn't forgot about Lawler. Hadn't been that long since he was a heel. So they still remember that. And in Evansville, it was the same thing. But when we came to Nashville, where me and Savage had all those epic battles,
Yeah.
I was about 80% baby face, and Lawler was like a 20% baby face.
Wow.
So he was actually the heel. And I remember I wrestled him one night in Nashville, and he told me Monday, he said, Dutch, crazy thing happened. He says, I went out to my car, and he says, usually I'm signing autographs and kissing babies and posing for pictures. He said, they were ripping the antenna off my car. He said, I don't know about this. But we did great business, and Lawler, we had great matches, and he's a great worker.
And what are your thoughts on his son's death that happened? I guess it's still...
It bothered me. 2 deaths bothered me in this business. Randy Savage, we just talked about him. Because, you hear wrestlers dying every day.
Yeah.
Some of them bother you, some of them don't. But Randy bothered me because I knew Randy when I first started. I remember when in Atlanta, remember I was telling you about Atlanta?
Yeah.
Randy was there too.
Okay.
Him and Angelo and Lanny for that company of Gunkel. They were there too. And Randy was doing Spider-Man. He only weighed about 160 pounds. And I didn't really work with him there, but I remember him there because he still had his baseball career going. So, and when we were talking about Lawler,
Yeah.
and but that's why they remember me in Nashville so well.
Yeah.
And
you were saying the death of his...
oh yeah,
Right.
we're talking about something else.
Yeah.
I've been hit on the head a couple 100,000 times, so forgive me.
Yeah.
Randy Savage bothered me to death more than any other up to that point. And what year did he die? 207, 205?
2011.
He died then?
Yes, because I was friends with Lanny at the time, and he led us to a tribute show that year. So I would definitely remember that one.
I think you're wrong.
I'll look it up.
Because I remember I was in TNA when he died. Well, maybe not. Maybe you may be right.
It's all right. I only remember it because of the show.
Let me tell this story. The last time I saw Randy was in TNA. Maybe that was it.
Yeah, because he had that small run.
He had that small run, and you may be right.
May 20th, 2011.
You're right.
Yeah.
Especially since you looked it up. But that bothered me, and Brian Christopher bothered me. Because I remember Brian when he's like 8 years old. Jerry would bring him down to the Mid-South or to TV. Very respectful young boy, good-looking little boy. And he got in the business, but by the time he got in the business, things had changed. He had to run in WWF, which was good. But once he left there, he had nowhere to go. Once he left that stage, the only stage he could go to is the independents.
Right.
Or do something else, and he didn't want to do something else, but he also had he wanted to achieve the same level of notoriety that his dad received, and he couldn't match that nowhere. But when I heard about, I was actually almost in Canada when I heard of his death, and it bothered me too, because I knew he's troubled. He had substance abuse problems. He had just been hospitalized about 2 or 3 months prior to his death. He got in a fight with another wrestler, and he drank a lot. So the other wrestler used to be a pro boxer a little bit, and just messed him up bad. Got arrested. And it's not a really a good story Yeah, it should have been, but it wasn't.
And it's well documented that you played a big role in Steve Austin's career. Could you talk about that for a little bit?
When I was booking Memphis, why, I don't know. See, Memphis used to alternate between Jerry Jarrett booking and Lawler booking. And I don't know what happened, but they were looking for a booker, and Jerry Jarrett wanted to know would I booked Memphis for a while. I guess Lawler didn't want to do it, or I don't know. So I'm booking there on a Monday night, and Bill Dundee walks in and he says, "Hey, mate, you know, you got this other guy coming in from Dallas." I said, "Who?" "I don't know. Some guy's coming in." And it was Steve Austin. But Jerry Jarrett didn't tell me that he had booked him. I think that would have been some valuable information to know. So the show started at 8, I guess, supposed to start at 8. This was like 6:45, and all of a sudden, well, you got another guy coming in, you got to put him on the card. Okay. So he walks in, and he was young Steve Austin with the long hair. And he introduced himself, Steve Austin. Okay. What's his real name? Steve Williams. Steve Williams introduces himself. And then Lance Russell came in. He was getting a rundown. He said, "What are you going to call the new kid, Dutch?" I said, "Oh, wait a minute." I said, "What's your name?" He said, "Steve Williams." I said, "Well, you can't be Steve Williams here." "Why not? That's my damn name." I said, "Well, we already got a Steve Williams, like Dr. Death Steve Williams. You can't, it's like having two Willie Nelsons. You can't have two of them." He said, "Well, that's my name." And I'm thinking, this kid just walked in the dressing room about 2 minutes ago. And I'm already in like a debate with him about his name. So, but anyway, I said, "Well, think of a name, I'll be back." I had to go do something. Then I come back, "You got a name?" "No, I don't have a name." I said, "Keep thinking, I'll be back." About 5 to 8, he was on first. Lance said, "Well, what are we going to call the kid?" He said, "Well, Dutch, what are we going to call the kid?" I said, "I don't know. For lack of a better name, let's call him Steve fucking Austin." Just off the top of my head. He said, "Like the $6 million man?" I said, "No, in your case, more like the $6 man. Now get your ass out there." And he went out there, and he's been Steve Austin ever since. I just put it off the top of my head. But actually, Steve Austin's a great name for him.
Oh yeah, very fitting. And you spent some time driving to the matches with him. What was he like personality?
Oh, he's great. He's entertaining as hell. And he listened to my philosophy about wrestling. And see, that's where guys learn about the business, was riding with guys who've done it. And he's very likable, very respectful. And if guys are smart, if they ride with somebody that kind of understands what they're doing, if you pick their mind, you'll learn a lot if you just listen.
Well, now you have to watch videos like this because there's no more territories.
No, there's no more territories. That's what I think. When you tell people, "Well, I used to work here or there, there," what do you mean you used to work there? They don't understand that. They don't.
Right. And The Undertaker, of course, you also rode with him when he was starting off. I don't know if he was Mean Mark Callis at that point. Or...
He was Master of Pain.
Master of Pain.
Master of Pain came in from Dallas, and I tag teamed with him. I actually lived with him for a while. Great athlete, good guy. But he would tell me stories about Don Jardine, the spoiler. That's where he got walking the ropes. He saw the spoiler walk the ropes. And great athlete. And I'm glad he did really, really well when he went to WWF. Because I was with him in WCW. He was Mean Mark Callis. And he told me one day, he says, "I got a chance maybe to go up there. What do you think?" I said, "Well, I'd go. If they offer you the chance to go, go. And right now. If you can get out of your contract here." And I guess he got out of it, so he ended up there. Because I always heard that The Undertaker was an extension of Vince's vision that he saw in himself.
Okay.
So Undertaker, in a lot of ways, was Vince's vision of himself in his own mind.
Right.
That's why I thought that he would never get beat. You know, when you have national sports outlets talking about an unbeaten streak, I don't think it should have ever ended.
Oh, I agree with you.
I'm still pissed off about it.
Yeah.
I think he should have retired undefeated.
And Brock didn't need that win either.
No.
So.
Who do you think's over more, Undertaker or Brock Lesnar?
Yeah. That's really unfortunate. And of course, Jim Cornette, you've been around him a long time. Any thoughts to share about him?
He's crazier than a goddamn bedbug. Love him to death. And he's hilarious. And he managed me. I was his first guy he managed. Here's a trivia question. But I wasn't the first person he managed. Who was the first one?
Female, wasn't it?
Yep.
I forget her name, but...
Sherry Martel.
Oh, really? Sherry Martel?
He was our first manager. You know that, did you?
No.
You know it now, by God.
That's interesting. So he was always obnoxious and loudmouthed, I guess, even inside and outside of the ring.
No. Not in dressing room. Not when he first started. Very respectful. And very intuitive of what it took to be successful at what he was going to do. And now he grew into that because he learned what he was doing. But at the start, not very vocal at all. Very respectful and did what he was told or what needed to be done.
Did you enjoy your time working for him in Smoky Mountain?
I did. I really did. The thing about Jimmy, he would come out, me and Bob Caudle would do the commentary, and we would have a little meeting, and he never told me what to say. He said, you know what to say, but this is some points I want you to hit on. And he would just tell me what to hit. And during the show, I would hit on it, or I didn't even have earphones to the truck.
Wow.
We just did it.
And you mentioned Kane earlier about when you're talking about Puerto Rico. Could you give your thoughts on Kane?
I met Kane in an independent show in Southern Indiana, probably early 90s. And I was going to Puerto Rico, I think, at the time. And I asked him would he be interested in coming down. And he said he would. And then I booked him. And I went to Puerto Rico. Well, I went to Puerto Rico, then I booked him. And then about a week before he got down there, he called me up and he was concerned. He said, well, I said, you act like you're not all gung-ho about coming. He said, well, I've heard a lot of things about down there, how guys don't get paid. And I said, well, let me say this. You'll be paid every week. I'll make sure of it. I'll make it a personal quest for me. And he came down and he was paid every week. I mean, I couldn't guarantee him his money, but once I got him down there, and I think when they saw him, they wouldn't try to jack him around.
And Jerry Jarrett wanted me to ask you if you had any idea why there might be some heat on Kane's part with Jarrett, because he said that Jarrett waved at him WrestleMania weekend, and he know that Glenn saw him and he ignored him, and I guess he's sent him a tweet when he won the election and Kane didn't respond, so he was wondering if you had any idea why there would be possibly some
heat with Jerry.
Yeah,
I don't know why that would have been. I never knew them to have any kind of disagreement, but he didn't really work for Jerry that much.
Right.
He worked for him as a Christmas monster, or I don't think he worked with Jerry at all, hardly. Maybe a few shots.
And I'll ask you just this on camera because Bill Dundee wanted me to ask you this on camera. You already told me the answer, but you don't know why The Undertaker didn't like Bill Dundee. Bill Dundee thought that The Undertaker didn't like him ever from the time they met.
Well, if that's a personality clash, it may be that, but Undertaker didn't like it. Hey, if Undertaker didn't like you, he just wouldn't even talk to you.
Right, yeah.
I mean, if you knew, and just because he didn't talk to Bill, and probably Bill perceived that as he didn't like him, but I don't know really any reason.
And you had some contact with the Von Erichs. Any thoughts about them?
No, very little contact with the Von Erichs. Very little.
And how did you end up becoming a commentator for WCW?
I asked him one day. Ole was the head guy, and I asked him, I said, hey, when are you going to put me on commentary? And sometimes I said, you just need to ask sometimes if you want to do something.
Yeah.
And I asked, and he said yes. And he put me out there with Tony Schiavone, and I did it for 18 months with me and Schiavone. I guess it's on Worldwide, I guess, was the name of it.
Yeah.
I never even knew the name of my own show I was on. But at WCW, I do know they worked the living shit out of me. Because I worked one time 64 straight days without going home.
Wow.
I was on the road for 64 days.
Because you were managing this or wrestling?
Well, I was working, wrestling, then I was doing commentary. So wherever we would fly back to Atlanta on Mondays. Then Tuesday morning, we'd fly back out. Then we'd fly back into Atlanta, then fly back out. And I went 64 straight days without going home.
Now, when I talked to Larry Zbyszko, he said that commentators were considered employees and they had different contracts than wrestlers.
I didn't.
And you were still considered a wrestler. Was it Jim Herd running the office?
Jim Herd. Jim Herd was there. I didn't have any much contact with him because I'd heard that he was a complete idiot. I don't know if he was a complete idiot, but...
So everything...
But this is how I got to Atlanta. They hired me, they gave me a job, and then didn't follow through with it. So I had a lawyer send them like a threatening letter, then they hired me. I don't know, I even have to think through that story myself now. I forgot how it went. But anyway, I almost had to threaten them to get, they initially offered to hire me and then just all of a sudden said they couldn't do it. I mean, it was their right to hire me or not. I just got pissed off at them one day and sent them a letter telling them I'm going to sue them for this, that, and the other. And they said, okay, here, come on in.
Interesting. And what was the whole thing with the Desperados vignettes that apparently it was going to have something to do with Stan Hansen, but it never worked out?
I don't know either. They never gave me a finish point on it.
Did you have anything to do with the creativity?
Zero. I think Dusty watched this movie about some damn bullshit fucking jack-off cowboys. And they were trying to get with this other cowboy. And that's where it started. Yeah. And they actually put a lot of money into that. We went on location to shoot it and everything. And then it just all of a sudden, nothing. It went nowhere. Stan Hansen actually left. You know, we would be on cards and we were looking for Stan Hansen all this time and people would say, he's right there in the dressing room. Can't you go talk to him? And we never intercepted him in the ring or did anything. If we'd have did any of that stuff, it would have made sense. Yeah. But it never made sense. He was on the same shows, the same TV shows we were on. And we were looking for him, but yet never ran across him. Just went on for like 5 weeks. I said, well, goddamn, when are we going to find? Are we that stupid we can't even find a goddamn guy who's in the next fucking room?
Yeah.
And he's in the same building we are, but yet we, 3 of us, I know we're dumb fucks, stumbling around, but we can't find this guy and he's in the same building. And then all of a sudden they just dropped it. But I heard they dropped it because Luger and Sting complained about it, that we were taking up too much TV time. What was it to them? They were getting paid. What difference did that make? But I did hear that.
And those are up on YouTube for people that want to check them out, I think.
What, the Desperado story?
Yeah, I've seen a couple of them.
It's stupid.
Did you have much contact with Luger? Oh, no.
Not really.
And what led to your release for that WCW run? Just the Desperados thing not working out?
No, I wasn't brought in with the Desperados anyway. They just tried something.
Okay.
And this contract just ran out.
No, I see. And of course, you were also the commentator for the famous Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view.
Oh, God. Worst pay-per-view ever.
Yeah.
Oh, they probably had some worse ones by now.
That one's just very memorable because at the time there wasn't as many pay-per-views and that was a big deal.
Well, it was a big fiasco. We didn't even have a production meeting. And I didn't even know the guy's name I did it with. And he knew zero about wrestling. And He knew none of the names of the holes, none of the names of the moves. He didn't know the background of the guys. He didn't know anything. And some crazy things happened on that show. Jake the Snake, probably one of the most memorable, when he took the snake, like,
Yeah.
you know, like he'd taken a piss and aimed it at somebody.
And some of the a collection.
And I was just trying to figure out some of the probably the commentary is probably the best thing on the show. Me doing my bullshit, but it was just I forgot who else was on it. Sheep was on it.
Yokozuna, I think that may have been his last appearance because he was just massive at that point.
And I forgot who else was on it.
Jim Neidhart.
And the guy who did it, I do know that he had a production company, and they did Ivy League football. He had the contract to do that. And he was a wrestling fan.
Somebody wanted me to ask you if you know anything about Billy Wicks.
Billy Wicks was a legendary wrestler name in Memphis. Never met him, and not now because people don't remember him. But back in the time, Billy Wicks, and I think Sputnik Monroe or...
Yeah, it was Sputnik Monroe, actually, that had the crowd.
Oh, yeah, and holding a different story about him. But Billy Wicks was like the Jerry Lawler during the Memphis era, and back in, I think, probably 60s and leading into the 70s, Billy Wicks. And Sputnik Monroe was supposed to be a heel, but he did more for race relations in Memphis than anybody else did. Because to the white people, Sputnik was a heel, but to the black people, he was a huge baby face because he actually refused to wrestle, I think wherever it was at that time, unless the black people were allowed down on the floor. And they all heard about that. So the black people in Memphis loved Sputnik Monroe. He could have probably ran for mayor and won.
Any stories on Andre the Giant?
Very few. That he was a legendary drinker. Didn't spend a lot of time around him. I do know that he hit one kid at Battle Royal in Chattanooga. He hit one kid because the kid must didn't like him or something, and I think he may have been half drunk. He hit him so hard, he literally knocked him through the ropes from halfway across.
Wow.
Hit him in the chest.
To discuss your first WWE run, you mentioned earlier you just kept calling them persistently, and they eventually said they had something.
You know who gave me that information? Terry Taylor. He said, call him every week. I called him every week for like a year and a half, every week. It got to the point where the receptionist, or Vince's secretary, knew my voice. And she'd say, oh, hi, Dutch. How are you? And I said, oh, I'm fine. How are you? Is Vince in? Oh, he's not in. Which was code for, yeah, he's in, but he's making no call. Damn sure not taking one from you. So, but just be persistent. If you want to go somewhere, all they can say is no. So just keep asking them until they say no and don't call no fucking more. And then call them again.
And I think your first team that you were managing was the Harris Brothers, is the Blues Brothers?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you know them already from Memphis?
No, I knew them. I didn't know them well, but I knew them. And I called up one day, and you know it was no. And then one day I called up and I talked to J.J. Dillon, and he said, "Yeah, we got a spot for you. Come on up." And I was in.
How did they present that character to you? The Uncle Zebekiah character?
Oh, they told me I was going to manage two like kids out of the mountains of West Virginia or Kentucky or whatever, and they were supposed to be so socially illiterate or culturally illiterate. They'd never seen a TV, and you know they were just supposed to have been like the Lost Tribe,
right,
up there in West Virginia. And I was their uncle that brought them out of the wilderness, and they actually had a really good chance of getting over, but they just didn't stay behind them.
Were you managing them that night where one of them had the issue with Shawn Michaels?
I was in the building, and I was there, but they never told me about it.
Okay.
Because I think this was kind of... See, Shawn at the time had mega heat backstage. with some of the talent. And I think Shawn had apparently said to Vince or somebody, or maybe Pat Patterson, something about Ron and Don. You know Ron and Don?
Not personally, but I know who they are.
Good guys, if they like you. If they don't like you, watch out. So they didn't beat Shawn up. They just snatched him in a room in Madison Square Garden. I think Ron did it. And Donnie was standing there too. And goozing him up on the locker and told him that any more badmouth of them to the office, it's going to get a lot worse than what he should get right now. They didn't hit him or nothing. They just warned him. And it let him down, and I guess the badmouthing started. And I don't know if Vince ever heard of that. I don't know if he ever heard of it. But I think it wasn't very long after that, I think Ron just quit. He just walked, he didn't like the pay scale. He didn't like what he was making. And then Don, like, you know, one twin quits. What's the other one going to do? Now he's by himself. So I think he walked out about a week or two later.
Because I guess at that time it wasn't a guaranteed contract. You got a percentage.
Oh, you got a contract, but it was nothing. I mean, the contract was a joke in those days. They only had to book you 10 times. And if you reached the point of, I think it was a very low figure. All you were guaranteed in those days was like $1,500. If they didn't book you at all, they just give you $1,500 to be out of the contract. But by the same token, you were forbidden and banned from working with anybody that they didn't approve of. You couldn't work any independent shows. You couldn't work for WCW. So the contract was basically a piece of paper that gave them everything and the talent zero.
And you earned a percentage of the house depending on where you were on the card, right?
Well, that's what they say.
Yeah.
They pay you what they want you to have,
okay.
Basically. So
that's why they say on some of these Canadian tours where it's Canadian money and the houses were low at that time, in some places they were actually losing money, some of the guys.
Possibly. Because it's according to what your expenses were.
Yeah.
But you could go, if the hotel room was $100 and you ate and you got rented a car, it might cost you $200 or more a day back in those days to make the show, and you might not make but $175. So you made, going to red, 25. That's not unheard of. That's why I think Ron Harris quit. Because, you know, working a job is supposed to be a profit job. You're supposed to show a profit on it. And when you don't show that, then you go into red, it's costing you money to go work.
Yeah.
And business was not good at all.
So I guess when the Blues Brothers were done, they presented the idea of Bradshaw to you.
Well, I presented that opportunity to them myself.
Oh, you knew Bradshaw?
I forgot where I was. I didn't know him. He came to the dressing room one night and sat down. We started talking, and he told me he'd been in Germany and he was coming back through and was trying to get a job. And I said, well. And then Bruce Pritchard, I think, came in the room. I said, Bruce, got an idea. He said, what? I said, what about me managing this guy when he goes out tonight? And he said, hey, fine with me, pal. So I went out. And when he came back, he worked with Savio Vega, I remember. A very good match, really. And he asked me, he said, do you think I got a job? I said, well, if that don't get you a job, I don't know what will. So he went back in the dressing room, and he was getting dressed, and Bruce walked in, and he says, well, I want you to sign this piece of paper here, you know. And he signed, and he looked at me, and he says, you got a job. Because I'd already signed my paper.
Yeah.
He said, you're with him from now on. Okay. That's how it worked. I just walked out there with him, and they liked the way it looked.
So it was just a dark match? Or
it was a dark match, and I forgot. I think we somewhere in Pennsylvania.
Okay. And what were your first impressions of him? Obviously, you got along well in that meeting. How was he on the road? Respectful and listening to
Bradshaw?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Really good. Here's a little odd quirk. Same birthday as I got.
Oh, really?
Guess who else has the same birthday?
No idea.
Jerry Lawler.
Oh, wow, that's very
Guess who else has got it? Mean Gene.
Good
Crazy,
luck
isn't it?
birthday for wrestlers, I guess.
But Lawler and I were born the same year, same day. He's born in Cleveland, I was born in Carolinas.
Is there any matches from that run with Bradshaw that stand out to you?
One. We were in Quebec. Is that where the Dukes are from?
Oh, actually, Carl, one night you were in Ottawa, actually, against Carl.
Yep.
And then you were in against again the next night, yeah.
Come in the room, and Gorilla Monsoon was, I'm sorry, George Steele was the agent. Nice guy. And he said, John, can you do us a favor? Oh, yeah, man, what you want? He said, we got this kid here, and he's come from a legendary family, and his name Carl.
Carl the Duke, yeah.
Carl the Duke, and, his Joe, and, all this. It comes from a wrestling background, and people know him.
Yeah, Paul the Duke is his.
Paul, yeah, and he
his
said, "Will you
father.
have a match with him?" He said, "Oh yeah, no problem." And can you kind of put him over? Oh, no problem, no problem. Went out there, but the kid is horrible. He's just horrible. And I forgot what I'm watching, and all of a sudden he shot John into the ropes, but he didn't say what he was going to do. And when John come off, John stopped and he had a little bit of confusion. Then he backed up and then he hit the ropes again. And this time he hit him with that clothesline. My God, I thought he'd killed him. Then he just beat the shit out of this little Duke kid. And the people were, I swear to God, behind me, they said, God, this is all I heard. God, oh my God. He was just, you could hear it all over the arena. They didn't know who this Leduc kid, they knew the name.
Right.
But
he wasn't really, he hadn't been wrestling long at that point.
And John just beat the living, not enough to really hurt him, but really, really solid. And I remember that, and then when he came out, George said, good job. And even the kid come up and said, oh, thank you very much. I don't think he'd realize he just got the crap beat out of him. Because he didn't probably know.
Yeah, I was just a kid at that show, but I was actually at
You was at that show?
Yeah, that was actually the very first match in that arena because they had just built it that year.
Yeah.
The Ottawa Senators Hockey Arena.
So that was the first set of matches. That wasn't the first match, was it?
That was the first match on the card. You guys had the very first match ever in that arena.
Vader was on that card too, right?
You wrestled Shawn Michaels.
Yep.
Yep.
Now I remember going to the back and Vader telling John, he said, man, that really inspired me. I said, oh God, oh God, that inspired you?
I think The Undertaker wrestled Mankind on that one too. But that's interesting. Of all the matches that were to stand out, it'd be that one.
Yeah, well, it stood out. And I remember pulling up to the building. I think it was that building. Was it a new building or no?
It was a brand new building, yeah.
There's another building there in Quebec that's an older building, I remember.
Because it was a tour. I think you did Quebec City, Montreal, and Ottawa, like all in a 3-day loop or something.
But I remember we going from somewhere to somewhere, and we stopped at this toll booth. So we asked, how far is such and such town? I don't know, maybe an hour, 2 hours. I went, well, what the fuck is it? Is it a goddamn hour or is it 2 fucking hours? That could be a distance of 60 to 80 miles.
Yeah.
If it's an hour. Or if it's 2 hours, I can add another 60 miles to it. I don't know. I got hot. Then we pulled into the parking lot and we said, where do we go in? And the guy would not speak English. And he kept talking to us in French. Oh, I got hot too. Because I knew he knew English. And they're not that goddamn backward there. He just didn't want to tell us. I just needed some information.
Yeah.
Just point. Just do something.
There's always, on the Quebec side, there's always some French people that are against English people. For a while, Quebec actually wanted to separate from Canada.
They wanted to secede.
Yeah.
That'll never happen, boy.
No. You may have also had the same match in Montreal, because I know they used Carl on 2 of those nights, but...
I think we only worked him once.
Okay.
I
think he may have wrestled Owen Hart in the
I think that
match.
might have been the first time we wrestled him, and I think the second time he said, well, we might need to switch him up to somebody else.
What ended that run with John Hawk Bradshaw, or Justin Hawk Bradshaw?
I think they wanted to do something else with him. I think they wanted to put him with Ron Simmons, and there was really not a spot for me with those two. That's what I think.
Yeah.
But maybe not. Again, it's one of those deals where this time just runs out. If you're not one of the top guys, you're expendable.
Yeah.
And I've been expended several times.
And I've got to ask you your opinion of all the bullying stuff that's come out in recent years about him. Because obviously, when he first came into the company, he wouldn't have been doing that kind of stuff anyways as a new guy. But you think there's any merit to that?
John was an overbearing son of a bitch. He could be, but it was good natured, but it was stiff.
Okay.
It was a joke, but it might not have been a joke to the people that he was getting on a little bit.
Do you still stay in contact with him?
Every now and then, I still talk to him.
Is there any piece of advice you gave him that you could tell he really took?
Well, he's probably one of the worst drivers ever, him and Tom Pritchard. Now, he complains all the time that the whole time I was with him, I never drove more than 40 miles, which is probably true. Because I used to tell him, John, that's your job. You drive, and I'll just navigate from this seat over here. But, no, he listened, but it's not like any specific piece of advice. John's a very smart guy. Took finance in school, and kind of knew what he wanted to do. And the WWE, WWF, gave him that opportunity to get his name out there. And now he's on Fox News Channel, and he's doing well there. So, but I didn't give him that advice to go and be on Fox News. I didn't know Fox was even around then. It could have been. I don't know.
And are you surprised he's become, over the years, one of the classic WWE characters and had a very successful run as champion? I would say he lasted as a long time in that position.
Does that surprise me?
Yeah.
No, at all.
You came back to WWE in recent years. Could you give us the short version of how you were brought back to the company?
Well, I was having a very bad period in my life. My granddaughter had gotten killed in August of 2012. And I just didn't give a shit. You know, and I'd been really basically out of regular work for a while, and you remember I used to tell you I used to call WWE, WWF every week?
Yeah.
I stopped calling everybody. I just didn't. But one day my phone rang, and it was head of talent relations, Mark Carano, and they were coming to Nashville, and he asked me, do you still live around Nashville? I said, yeah. He said, well, we're going to be there on like the 13th or something. I said, okay, we'd like to talk to you. Triple H would like to talk to you. I said, okay. So when the day came, I went down there, but I had it in my head that they wanted me to talk to me about doing something at NXT, like being a teacher there, being an instructor. So I walked in, and that's not what they wanted to talk to me about. They want to talk to me about being a mouthpiece for Jack Swagger. And they kind of told me what they wanted. They wanted an older guy who had seen a lot happen in the country, that was a history buff, that was a political, had a political attitude about him. And he felt that the country was going down to the dogs, or downhill, and he wanted it's almost like a repeat of the Tea Party. Wanted me to be that, and wanted to put me with Jack, and he told me the story. And so he said, listen, we're going to do a little interview with you. We're going to give it to Vince and see what he says. So he said, think about what I just told you. And I said, what am I going to say? He said, we're going to leave that to you. Okay. So you know and I've told this story. Do you know the movie Gran Torino?
Yes.
I channeled Clint Eastwood. And I had 10 minutes to put this interview together. So when they came on, they could count you down 3, 2, and I started talking. And I told them that I'd seen everything happen in this country, but when I walk down the streets, I don't see people that look like me. I don't see people that talk like me. I don't see people that eat the same food as I eat, or like the same things I like, or speak the same language. And my question was, what happened to my country? And I ended it with We the People. And when I put that in there, they took it to Vince. And you know, Vince is noted for saying you're fired, but Vince said you're hired. And I think I'm the only one who ever went there. I went in it by about 3:30 in the afternoon. I talked to Triple H about 4:30. I did my interview at 5:30, and at 7:30 that night I was live on Raw. And 75% of the dressing room didn't even know who I was.
Well, that's not a surprise with today's wrestling.
Because the actual burnout rates about in NXT, a lot of them go and do a year and gone. They never even see the inside of a WWE, full roster arena. They'll never see it. But when you think about it, how many people in the world sell 1.5 billion? And you talk about the alumni of WWF and WWE, it's very minute. It's very small.
Yeah.
So to be a part of that is really an exclusive club.
And do you think Jack Swagger has made a good decision leaving WWE to
I think he made a great decision. Because now I told him, I said, now, people know who you are. You need to take your notoriety and you need to use it to benefit whatever you want to do. I don't give a fuck if you're selling houses. You're Jack Swagger. That name has equity to it. You have to take that name and you got to build it and keep it moving. Now with this MMA career he's doing, I think he'll do really, really well. Jack's a great athlete. He's very strong, and usually your wrestlers they're not the real stocky guys.
Yeah.
They're the kind of the long guys, tall guys. They're better wrestlers. I don't know why, but I think he'll do good.
He definitely has good.
And I think he will be back in WWE.
And is there any matches that stand out about him? Did he beat up some Canadian kid?
No. We went Bowling Green, Kentucky. I forgot. And I remember Jack went to grab something, and that's when we both had to take a week off. Because maybe 2 weeks, he cut his hand or something. And he was going to hit Del Rio with a damn chair, and he ended up almost killing himself, hurting himself, and he did. Had to take him off the road for a while.
And speaking of Del Rio, what are your thoughts on him and some of the decisions he's made in recent years? There's been a lot of stuff with
Well, he left the company the first time because he slapped that guy.
Oh, yeah, slapped the guy in the...
and I don't think the guy meant anything racial by it, but Del Rio has a pretty quick temper. And I don't think he meant anything by it, but I think Del Rio ended up slapping the shit out of him. Then he had to leave. Then the guy left too, so it didn't do either one of them any good. Then he came back with me for whatever fucking reason that was supposed to be. I never understood that. Nobody understood it. I didn't understand it. I had an idea for it, but they didn't want to hear it. So you got to be careful when you work with WWE. Sometimes if you give them an idea, you have to make them think it's their idea. Then they will gravitate to it if they think it's their idea. If they think it's yours, they may not be as eager to accept it. But putting me back with Del Rio made no sense, and it was blowing up. I knew it was blowing up when we were doing it, because people was looking at us and like, what does this mean? More than we don't like you guys. So.
Were you traveling with him at the time?
I was just doing TV.
Oh, okay. And I guess you worked with Antonio Cesaro a few times, or you were managing him for a while?
I managed him. Great guy. Great worker. And him and Jack, when they were together, I thought they were the most over tag team there. When we hit the floor, people would get up.
Wow.
Because Cesaro was a great, great athlete.
And you were involved with an angle that Paul Heyman was also part of there. What's your opinion of Paul Heyman and working with him?
I remember I did an in-ring with him, is all I'm thinking.
That may have been it. I was reading it on the internet because I haven't been watching the past few years.
We had a debate about something. No, it was about Cesaro. Because he took Cesaro at WrestleMania 29, and that's when Cesaro won the Andre the Giant Battle Royal. And we had just gone out there in the dark match, the opening match. We had a four-way tag team match. And I remember, I forgot who it got down to. I think we went out second. I mean, eliminated second. And when we left, the crowd just got quiet. I said, guys, are we going up the ramp? I said, listen to this crowd. What happened? They said, I don't know. I said, all the gravity, all the air's gone. We took the air out of the building. Because they wanted you guys to win. When you guys eliminated, nobody cheered for it. See, we were supposed to be heels, but we really weren't heels.
Right.
People kind of liked us.
And I guess when you left WWE, that was just the end of your run there. They tried a bunch of stuff with you, and the creative.
Well, I had knee surgery.
Okay.
This is what a lot of people don't know. I had knee surgery. Then 2 months later, I was getting ready to go back to WWE. But then, all of a sudden, I'm doing an exercise of stretching, and my knee buckled. Then I fell, and I broke my femur in 2 places. Right above the knee, and right above that about 6 inches. So I broke my leg in 2 places, went in, had emergency surgery. Then I got an infection, and my fever went to 100, 101, 102, and 103. And when it hit 104, I went in what they call delirium. I didn't know where I was. And my kidneys were shutting down. So they finally, and imagine in a hospital you have a fever and they can't get it down, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
So they finally brought the doctor in there, and this is what I found out. Let me tell you one thing about doctors. Half of them finish in the bottom 50% of their class. So you got to watch doctors, because they'll sit there in an American hospital. They will sit there and literally watch you die if you don't have an advocate. Had not been for my daughter and my wife, I would have died. But they finally brought the doctor in that I didn't even know, and he shot me up with antibiotics, and because I couldn't urinate, and that was, my bladder had failed too. They said another 4 hours I would have went into sepsis. Is it septic shock?
Yeah.
And I would have died. I was that close to death. And I'm still recovering from it.
Well, we wish you the best in your recoveries for sure.
You don't give a shit.
Oh, I do. I'm a fan of yours. And speaking of health problems, did you get through that India tour in TNA without experiencing any stomach issues?
Well, I didn't eat any food. I didn't eat any of the food. You know what I ate there? I ate flan. I love that. I ate that. And that's about the only thing I ate. I didn't eat hardly anything else. I ate potatoes, but I ate no meat, or very little meat. And I was in India twice. I was in India probably for 18 days between 2011 and 2012. You ever been to India?
No.
Well, don't go. Yeah. Man, that place, too many people, 1.3 billion people. And there's a
big division between rich and poor, I hear.
Big. You have this high-rise, 30-story high-rise. And you know what they look out on? The shantytown. You know the Slumdog Millionaire?
Yeah.
We went by where they actually filmed it. And it is horrible. There's no clean water. There's no bathrooms. It's terrible. I don't know how they live like that. And
I guess when Jeff Jarrett got back into power in I guess Global Force took over TNA for a while. It was very confusing for a while there. And then you were a writer at that time again. I guess, was it Jeff Jarrett that brought you back?
I'm going to be very honest with you. I'll be honest with Jeff too. I didn't understand the Global Force connection. I never understood how we blend the two. I never quite understood it.
Because it had.
But then all of a sudden, Global Force was there, and then all of a sudden, no, we're not talking about it no more. It was there, then it wasn't there. I never understood it, and it was never explained to me in a way that I could make it understood.
And what were your thoughts on that run there?
The Impact run?
Yeah.
With Anthem?
Well, were you still working for them when it went to Anthem?
Oh yeah, that's when I worked for them.
Oh, okay. I thought.
You saying the global with TNA?
Well,
I don't really remember that.
I thought that you were brought back in with Jeff, and then when it switched to Anthem, you just carried over from being brought from.
No, I wasn't brought in with Jeff. I was brought in on my own by Ed Nordum.
Okay.
He brought me on. Jeff was later than I was. So the Global Force and TNA, I don't understand. I know there was a Global Force and Impact.
It's, yeah.
Maybe I should listen a little more. Maybe these creative meetings, I just totally missed it.
Yeah, no, it was, for a while, I believe it was Global Force and it was called Impact Wrestling, and I don't know. That's part of their problem, I guess, was the branding, but.
Well, they didn't know. I didn't know either.
Yeah.
Because all the belts were made that said one thing, and the announcers were talking about something else.
So how recently was that? What was your run there?
2017.
Okay, until
2017. January 2017 to January 2018. I was there a year. I was there a year. I signed a year deal. But by that time, the company had changed so much.
Yeah.
And it moved, and then Jeff come in, and all of his problems, and then he went to rehab. But
so what was your role?
It's a normal wrestling run.
Yeah. But you weren't an agent at the Canadian tour last November, right?
No, I was not.
Did you have anything to do with that creative?
This is what I found out. It's like anything else. When you get older, all of a sudden apparently you get fucking stupid, I guess.
Yeah.
And when I would go to creative meetings, good guys, but I would suggest something, and then they start talking about something else. Okay. A couple of times like that, I said, okay, I'll just pick up the check till it ends, and I go along.
That's exactly what Al Snow told us.
What's that?
Al Snow told us something similar when
That's the same deal. If they don't listen to you, what are you even there for? We don't all need to come and sit around. And I hate committee booking anyway.
Yeah.
I think it's better with just two guys, maybe three, and no more.
So sometimes who was it? D'Amore, you, Jeff Jarrett, and
Jeff wasn't even there. It was me, Sanjay Dutt, D'Amore, Abyss, Jeremy Borash. I think sometimes a few more people. Sometimes they'd float in and out. But there was no vision for the company. It was just, let's put these 8 hours or 10 hours of TV together. Now trying to put 2 hours together or 4 hours together at one time, that's a chore. Trying to put 10 hours together or 5 or 6 or 8 shows. If you put 8 shows together, that was 16 hours of original content. Very, very difficult to do. Very difficult to even see it when you put it on the board.
Yeah. One guy I don't understand really why they put him in charge, other than perhaps Jericho called in a favor for him, from what I understand, was Don Callis, because he had a company in Winnipeg for about a year that went out of business, a wrestling company, so maybe he has a great...
I think he's D'Amore's buddy.
Yeah.
I think.
So I guess there is...
I think he's Canadian.
Oh, okay.
Because the Canadian company owns Impact.
Yeah.
Anthem, they're a Canadian company.
Do they still have an office in Nashville too?
I think they still have their production facilities here.
Because I remember when I was paid by them last year, the check was from Nashville, and it was American money.
What'd you do for them last year?
They did a taping in my town, and they brought me in for a match because I could
Okay.
get publicity.
Well, the accounting may
It's
still
just,
be in Nashville. This was
What, they all-
2017?
Yeah,
What town was this?
Ottawa. Is it true you came up with the Laura Van Ness gimmick for Chelsea Green?
We had a wedding. Yes, I put that over. We had a wedding, and they wanted to do where she got jilted at the altar, and she was so good. Did you see the segment?
No, but I saw a few matches of her.
She
doing
was
the gimmick.
so good in this segment, and the way she was crying, and she was just distraught, but it was almost like this. You know, she was a heel anyway, so
Yeah.
people enjoyed seeing her get her comeuppance from little Allie. You know,
Yeah.
she was left at the altar, and she was interviewed. It was going to show the next week, and she was still in the building, but in the back crying. And so the announcer started out, a female announcer, and I actually forgot her name, really, pretty girl. And she said, "We're backstage. What is that sound?" And she opened up and turned the light on. There was Laura Van Ness, still in the building, crying and drinking. Hadn't changed the dress or nothing. And when I saw that, I said, well, she's going to have to stay in this a while. And we kept her in that dress till I left. And then they said, well, we need to take her out of the dress. I said, guys, you take her out of the dress, you might as well take her gimmick away. She's just going to be another girl wrestler. Keep her in it. And we actually trimmed her dress up some. It was too long. But she got over that, the hot mess, Laura Van Ness, one of my favorite characters.
And I think she ended up asking for a release while she was champion, and she...
Well, that's what I heard.
Yeah.
But that was the Canadian show, right?
Yeah. And now she...
But they knew that she was going to have this tryout.
Yeah.
So if she's going to have a tryout, first thing in creative, you got to protect yourself. I mean, you needed to see how this tryout was going to go before you put the title on her.
Yeah.
How'd they get it off of her?
I don't recall. I think Allie ended up beating her, from what I understand.
Little Allie's very good, by the way.
Yeah.
Very good.
So who knows? You might be back writing for them one day. You never know with that company, I guess, as you still have your friends with Abyss, I guess, and probably a few other people in that company.
Yeah. But I don't think I'll be back writing for them. I think my writing days are kind of behind me because it's really a thankless job.
Yeah.
It really is. Because you've got to almost sell your ideas to the rest of the team unless you're the head of it.
Yeah.
You got to sell it, and then for them to put it down. And you know, when you go around the table, say, I get my idea here, and it goes to you, then I want you to tell it to the next guy, and the next guy tells it to the next guy. It goes all around the table. When it gets back to where it started, I've done this before. The whole angle has changed, and sometimes with different people.
Yeah.
So that's why I say it's better for creative to be basically nuanced by a few instead of a lot.
We're now live with Dirty Dutch Mantell for any fan questions.
Mr. Dirty Dutch to you.
Mr. Dirty Dutch Mantell. So any fans could write in questions. And one fan question we had was your thoughts on your scaffold matches with Bill Dundee.
Well, heights, I'm afraid of them, and they came up with this idea in Memphis without my consent. But once it was booked, I was more or less obligated to do it. I'm not a big fan of scaffold matches. You're limited in what you can do, plus it's dangerous. And of course, who had to come off the scaffold? Of course, it was going to be me. So at the Mid-South in Memphis, they put it up. I was looking directly into the second tier. I was at least 15 feet off the ground. I finally went off of it reluctantly, but not a big fan of scaffold matches. Now in the other matches, we would go to Louisville a week later with a scaffold match, and that scaffold wasn't too bad, it wasn't too high. I went to Evansville, Indiana, and the scaffold match consisted of a big 2x10 board ran across 2 regular ladders, straddling the top rope, and some guys standing there holding it. That was the scaffold. So anyway, not a big fan of scaffold matches.
Someone's asking what your thoughts are of Buddy Landel. Could he have done better?
Buddy Landel could have been a star. A big star, and had a chance of being a star when they booked him against Ric Flair, and this was probably, I don't know what year this was, early 80s maybe, I guess. But Buddy always had demons. I love him to death, but he had demons, and he could have been as big a star as maybe a short-lived star maybe, but he could have been as big a star as Ric Flair.
Was there ever any super hot ring rats back in the day?
Yeah, they were. They were like women you see anywhere else. Except when ECW started coming around, the girls stopped coming. Because then it became hardcore, and that attracts more guys than women. Women don't like to see blood and guts and people getting stabbed, and that kind of turned them off. So one time, I noticed that in Philadelphia, because the crowd kind of turned all male instead of female. We used to go there, half the crowd would be females. Then all of a sudden, with ECW and the hardcore style, it just turned to male, and which took a lot of fun out of it, I think.
You have a fan from London, England, asking you who's the most underrated wrestler today.
Underrated? I say of the current bunch, this is what WWE does, and I love WWE, and I think it's a great company, and thank God for them. But they have a tendency to like underutilize some of their talent. I think Jack Swagger was probably one of the most underutilized talents they had in recent years. And even though they're using Cesaro in the tag team, I think he'd be better off almost a single, I think. But that's just me, so.
Do you remember the 9-man match you had with you in the Stud Stable against the Rock and Roll Express and some other wrestlers? The question's already popped down, but...
Do I remember the what match?
A match you had where you were with the Stud Stable against the Rock and Roll Express.
I do remember the match. It was like it was a big show. It was in Kentucky. I remember that. Rock and Roll Express, and I think their partner was
Arn Anderson.
Arn Anderson, and I forgot the other team. I do remember that.
Who's your favorite wrestler of all time? Someone's asking.
My favorite wrestler of all time. Well, I met 1,000, so I would say Steve Austin, because I helped kind of mentor him in his early years. But if I have to watch somebody, I like to watch him because he's got a good interview and he's entertaining.
The Heavenly Bodies were the other two the guy just wrote in that 9-man match. He said the Heavenly Bodies.
The Heavenly Bodies with Cornette, that's right.
If you could have one more match, who would it be against? Someone's asking.
Randy Savage.
Because you made the most money with him?
No, I just enjoyed working with Randy a lot. He was very intense, and Randy was in his own atmosphere. He was in his own stratosphere. So when you got in the plane with Randy Savage, if you got inside that bubble, it was intensity. Loved working with him.
Who was the wrestler that went the furthest with the least talent, in your opinion?
Well, I think a lot of them have. Right offhand, I can't tell you. I've had to pick one.
Any memories of the Blade Runners?
I do remember them. They came to Memphis straight out of wrestling school in California. They were called America's Team or Team America or something. And I remember talking to them, and I managed them they weren't there long. I managed them about 3 weeks, 4 weeks maybe. They were jacked to the gills. But I told them, I said, guys, and the Blade Runner movie had just come out. I said, you guys need more of a catchy name or a memorable name than Team America. So I gave them the Blade Runners, and so we started calling them the Blade Runners. Because back in those days, they had no copyright laws, or they did, but they were hard to enforce. And so they became the Blade Runners for a short amount of time. But then Hellwig, he went to Dallas, and I think Sting went to Bill Watts' territory out in the Midwest. And so that's how they got started. But they actually got their initial start in Memphis.
Who came up with the Kansas Jayhawks name when you tagged with Jaggers?
Dusty. And after a while, I changed the Kansas Jayhawk. I actually changed the name. Or I wanted to change the name to like the Kansas Jackoffs.
Did you ever appear in New Brunswick, Canada?
I did. I think so. Nova Scotia? Is that
Nova Scotia's right beside it.
What is Brunswick?
New Brunswick,
Halifax?
St. John's, New Brunswick is the big
Yeah,
town.
I've been there one time.
Why did Vince go from putting you with Jack Swagger to Alberto Del Rio? Is it because you were getting too much heat?
No, I don't think so. To be honest, I have no idea when he brought me back why I went with Del Rio. Because history, one thing about wrestling fans, they don't forget the story. So me being with Del Rio made absolutely no sense unless it had a big payoff at the end. And I never heard of a payoff, and eventually it went zero. It started at 50 miles an hour, and instead of increasing, it dropped down to like 5 miles an hour. It was hitting on zero. So we entered it.
Who's the person in the locker room that can always put a smile on your face, even when you're having a bad day?
Well, I'd have to think on that one too. Because years ago, we were so tired from traveling all these ungodly miles, it took somebody special to put a smile on your face. But I would give you one, Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart, I don't think has ever, it's I love you, baby. Every time you see him, and he's always up, and he's always upbeat. So Jimmy Hart probably would be the one that could make you feel better.
Did Psycho Sid and The Undertaker get along after The Undertaker replaced Sid in the Skyscrapers? Do you know?
Oh yeah, there's no problem with him. No problem at all. That's all business anyway.
Who's better, Bret or Kurt Hennig?
Bret
Or Kurt Hennig?
inside the ring. To me, my personal favorite, I liked Kurt Hennig better.
What happened to your podcast?
That's an interesting story. There's this guy named Jim Beaver Motorsports, and he has a podcast called Down and Dirty. So he sent a lawyer sent me a letter to Court Bauer, who's head of MLW the podcast, I guess, that he wanted me to cease and desist of using Down and Dirty with Dutch because it would confuse fans in the marketplace. Now, Jim Beaver Motorsports is truck racing, and I have yet to understand how anybody could get confused about truck racing and professional wrestling. And mine is Down and Dirty with Dutch, which I have had since 1993 or 92. And if anybody stole the name, they stole it from me. But Kurt Bauer, he didn't want to go to court with it, so I didn't want to hassle with it, so I just entered it. I'm coming back pretty soon, though. I might call it First Down and Dirty with Dutch.
Worst backstage argument you've ever witnessed, other than, of course, the Brody situation?
Actually, I was in it. When I started out, I was in Savannah, Georgia. I was wrestling this guy. He had left and he had come back. And he was a champion when he left, but when he came back, I guess they were working him back to get back into the championship bubble, but he didn't want to wrestle me, and he just got mad at me one night and punched me, almost knocked me out in the ring, and he hit me twice. So I rolled out of the ring, told the referee to count me out, went back to the dressing room, looked at myself in the mirror, and it was this side right here, and it was bleeding. So I walked outside, opened the door, and there's a janitor's closet. I reached in there, I pulled out like a dust mop handle, broke it over my knee, and I went right through the back of the building, through the kitchen, to the other dressing room, walked in, I said, "Hey, motherfucker," and he came at me again. I put 14 stitches in his head. So, and guess what? He never bothered me again.
Someone says hello from Germany, and Kevin Nash had said that at one point you were traveling with Sid and the Sheik. Any stories from that time?
Oh, God. Yes, I do. But it's too long to tell here. But I traveled like 30 days with them, because I was telling you a little earlier, in WCW, I went 64 straight days without a day off. 30 of those days was with Sid and Sheik. And it was different, let me say that. The Sheik is different. Love him to death, but he's different.
Are you still a Clemson football fan?
I'm a huge Clemson football fan. Disappointed in them this year, though.
Do you think there's any chance that TNA could bounce back to what it was when you were booking it in its peak?
No, I don't think Anthem could bounce back. No.
What do you think about Brock Lesnar?
Great MMA guy. Vince loves him. That's about all. And I don't know him that well.
Question from Texas. Any memories about the Dallas Sportatorium?
Not a lot. A few, but not a lot. Hot as hell in there, I know that.
What did you think about All In, if you even watched it?
All In was a good. I didn't watch it. I saw clips of it, but I was there for the Starcast. I was there.
Thoughts on Roman Reigns?
I like him.
Any memories of my hometown of Chattanooga, Tennessee?
I love Chattanooga. Great wrestling town. I like the building in Chattanooga. I like the way it was laid out. The people were right on top of you. In Chattanooga, a lot of people don't know this, but we did an individual show just for Chattanooga every Saturday afternoon. And it was designed exclusively for the Chattanooga market, which is, you're just promoting one show. And I never saw Chattanooga sold out ever, but when I wrestled Randy Savage, I mentioned him a while ago, we came close to selling the place out.
Who would you like to manage in today's WWE if you could manage somebody?
Vince McMahon. That's who I'd manage. He'd be the champion.
That's an excellent answer. And this is the last fan question I'm going to ask him. Thoughts on CM Punk?
CM Punk? Well, I don't know him really well. I met him in TNA when he was first starting out. And then I was just on cards with him and the WWE. And I remember the day he quit WWE, I think it was in Chicago, I think. And I was trying to talk to Vince and couldn't get in there because CM Punk had him tied up all afternoon. And I wish him a lot of success if he has another MMA match. But I think he may have one more. Doesn't matter whether he wins or loses. He gets a good payday and he goes home.
Thanks for your questions, everyone. We're going to finish up our interview now. So just to close this interview off, is there any final thoughts you want to say?
Any final thoughts? No, I've always loved the wrestling business, but I love wrestling fans because I think wrestling fans are the most loyal fans out there. And they bitch and moan, but all they're bitching and moaning is they want a winning team. Nothing wrong with winning. They want wrestling that's enjoyable to them. They don't want to sit there and be bored. They don't want to sit there. They want to have a good time. And they don't give a shit who wins and loses. Sometimes they do. But they want to be entertained. And one thing about wrestling fans, most of them when they come, I go to a lot of conventions, but they don't get into argue politics and this and that and the other and all kind of damn social justice issues. They talk about wrestling. They have one common theme, and that's wrestling. And that's why I like to go to conventions. So if you're at a convention, I'm there, come and talk to me. I'll talk to anybody.
Where can people follow you on social media? And
Social media, you can follow me on, well, hell, I got to think. Oh, yeah, Dirty D Mantell on Twitter, and Dirty Dutchman 1 on Twitter. And I have 2 on Twitter. Why? I had one before WWE. That was a Dirty Dutchman 1. That was before. And the Dirty D Mantell, it used to be Zeb Coulter. I could still take it back to Zeb Coulter, I guess. But I just got rid of that. But one thing about WWE, when you leave, yeah, your Twitter followers, they don't cancel it. You just change it and you keep it. And on Facebook, it's Dirty Dutch Mantell. You happen to have an email address there? Maybe you can look for me.
Yeah, your email.
I'm on there. But I don't do a lot on Facebook. I don't. And what else would I be on?
Your book, where can people get your book?
Oh, yeah. Well, you can Google that. And I've done 2 books. It's, oh, yeah. If you're interested in one of my books, you can write me at Dirty Dutch Mantell with 2 L's at gmail.com. And I've done 2 books. The first one was called The World According to Dutch. And the second one was called Tales from a Dirt Road. And if you're an old-time wrestling fan, this book's for you. Because in this book, I didn't out anybody. I didn't call anybody a drug addict. I didn't call anybody a drunk. I didn't call anybody gay. I didn't call anybody this, that, or cheated on their wife. It's just stories from the road that I compiled into 2 books. And I still got a lot more, and I'm coming out with another book. A lot of stories about The Undertaker. A lot of stories about Randy Savage. A lot of stories about when I started, this, that, and the other. And stories about Sting, and we just talked about them a while ago. Sting and Ultimate Warrior when they first started. A lot about Memphis, a lot about WWF, old WWF, and because I wrote this before I got to the WWE on my second run. But you can just contact me and I'll give you the information on purchasing the book. Great books, by the way. And I wrote every word. No ghostwriter for me. There's one misspelling in the whole book. And I put, instead of Jim Cornette, I put Jen. And nobody caught it. Jen Cornette.
Do you have kids?
I do have kids.
Did you ever use the bullwhip on them when they were bad?
Well, no, I didn't. But my daughter told me she was glad to be the daughter of a professional wrestler, because when I was going to discipline her, I just pretended
very
to discipline
funny,
her.
yeah.
She just acted like I was doing something to her.
Any way to close this off in a Zeb Coulter promo?
Well, I want every real American within the sound of my voice to please rise. Put your hand over your heart, and in a loud, clear voice say along with me, we, the people.